The Noble Queen, a Shadow Slave Fanfic. By Author NobleQueenBee, Chapter 326-350. Instructor Rock. Noble greeted her colleague as he neared. Rock nodded amiably at her. "You look like you could use some company," he said, glancing around at the students whispering around her. "Did my husband send you?" Noble quirked an eyebrow at the burly man beside her. "No. Should he have?" Rock's genuine confusion made Noble relax. She waved her hand apologetically. "Sorry. No, he is just feeling very protective now that I'm back. A bit of company sounds nice. You can tell me how you have been and catch me up on things at the academy." Rock fell in step beside the slender woman. The muscular instructor stroked his chin, deciding which topic to tackle first. "The academy is mostly how you left it. From what I hear, your android has been doing well analyzing memories for those who need it." But Noble could sense the hesitation in his words. "How do I put this delicately? B2 does not have your personable nature. In your absence, some people have found the android to be a little blunt." Rock fumbled for the appropriate word. "Are you saying B2 hurt people's feelings?" Noble tried to grasp what was being said. Rock nodded. Made awakened Louvel bawled like a baby. Of course, that guy was insufferable. No one was sad to see him go. Noble decided not to dwell on the fact that her android had made one of the most arrogant people at the academy cry. A good portion of the staff has gone to join the Southern campaign. Many left just last week to head to the coast. I see. Noble herself knew the pull of duty. Only her duty pulled her in two different directions, which had led her to stay behind and serve in other ways. Clearing her throat, Noble smiled up at the battle instructor. "Well, I am glad you are still here. I was beginning to think I wouldn't see anyone I knew." Rock winced. "I am glad I could welcome you back before I leave also. I am planning to wait until after the solstice to make sure the students get the help they need beforehand." Noble missed a floating step. "Wait. You are heading to Antarctica also." Was she about to be the only teacher left on campus? Maybe. Eventually. But first I plan to tackle the second nightmare. Queen Bees, your return made me realize that I need to practice what I teach. I can't sit by and let sleepers have all the adventure. Rock glanced to the side just in time to see Noble's eyes swirl. She had inspired him. That was a strange thought. The professor was used to students and occasionally other young people saying she had helped or inspired them, but Rock was a colleague. Noble wasn't sure how to feel about that. "I didn't choose to go into the second nightmare, Rock," Noble said after a moment. "It kind of chose me." "I know," Instructor Rock gave a weary smile. "But that doesn't change the fact that you pushed through and came out the victor. You chose to survive. I will too." Feeling his resolve, Noble simply nodded. Who was she to get in the way of someone who wanted to keep one more seed from blooming? "I wish you well, Rock." "Thank you, Master Noble." Rock paused. "Could I possibly ask some questions sometime about your experience? Success is preparation in action, after all." "Oh." Noble blinked. She had helped the man with memories once or twice, but usually, she was going to him for tips on how to battle more effectively. "I mean, of course. I would be happy to help. Just let me get bearings, and after today we can set up a lunch meeting in the cafeteria." "Of course. Forgive me. I did not mean to put another task on your to-do list, but I could not let the opportunity pass without asking." Rock rubbed the back of his head. Coughing lightly, he motioned toward one of the buildings. "Will you be needing a practice arena today? I can make sure one is empty whenever you need." "Not today." Noble shook her head and looked straight ahead of her. Her neglected office and classroom would require all of her attention for at least the next week. "I'll let you know next time. I would like to practice, though. If you want, we could spar at some point as well." "I would like that, but only if you have time, Master Noble. As you pointed out, you will need to get back into a routine." "I wish you well also." The man gave a crooked smile as if to say he believed that coming back to the waking world was much harder than leaving it. And perhaps it was. A short while later, the two parted ways. Noble suspected that Rock had walked with her much farther than he needed to, but his presence kept anyone else from seeking her attention. The battle instructor was well respected by the students and none of the sleepers thought it would be wise to upset him. Inside the building, Noble veered off from her initial path. She would get to her room soon enough, but catching up with Rock had reminded Noble that she had another person that she had promised to visit on her return to the academy. The man's office door was shut, but she could see the light was on. Noble knocked lightly. "Come in," came the friendly voice from the other side. Inside, Julius was studying something intensely. It took a few seconds for him to look up, but when he did, his bushy eyebrows rose and a smile broke across his face. "You are here, dear girl." Julius abandoned the page and rose from his seat. He hurried to hug Noble. "I must say I am surprised to see you." "I do still work here," the professor reminded him. "Unless you know something I don't." Julius ushered the woman into the room. "Not at all. I just assumed you would take some more family time. But I guess it has been a week. Please take a seat." Clearing his work, the gray-haired gentleman sat behind the desk with a pleased expression. He had never been very good at hiding his emotions from his face. Noble liked him all the more for it. "I guess you made it past your adoring public outside." Julius winked. Noble covered her face with her hand. "Barely. I know I should have seen it coming, but I didn't expect all the hubbub." "Have they been there all week?" "Only since that article came out. The other reporters are desperate for a story that isn't about Antarctica. There is only so much they can say about the struggle there without sounding redundant." Julius's smile widened. "One of them even wanted to interview me. They said they wanted to talk to the person who inspired the Dreamscape champion. I know that title rightfully belongs to your parents, so I politely declined. Still, it was nice to be recognized." Julius paused. "But you aren't here about all that. I suspect you are here about something else entirely." The old man's face turned very serious. "Tell me what is on your mind." Noble felt a little uncomfortable under Julius's stern gaze. His eyes always looked too kind, it was strange to see them have such intensity. "Nothing is on my mind in particular. I mostly just wanted to check in like I said I would. I have missed seeing you." Noble appreciated the guidance of her mentor over the years. Did she only ever come when she needed something? "You have spoken to your mother?" Julius asked, his words tentative. "Every day since I got back." "Why?" Noble tilted her head curiously. "Did she mention anything in particular that you might like to talk about?" The older gentleman pressed. "What do you mean?" Noble scrunched her face, garnering a soft sigh from her mentor. He smiled weakly. "I seem to have misunderstood the reason for your visit. I had assumed you were here for more than a social call. Forgive this old man and let me try again. Good morning, Noble. How are you doing on this fine day?" The professor smiled warmly at him. The survivalist expert could be a little eccentric at times, but he always meant well. "My therapist said I am coping well," Noble responded half-jokingly. "I am glad you are talking to one," Julius told her. "Many of my contemporaries did not understand the importance of mental health until it was too late." He paused for a moment of silence, and Noble wondered briefly just how many of his friends had broken under the pressure of the trauma. Then he blinked and came back to the present, his face brightening like he was coming out of a daze. "Yes, it's very good for you to take care of yourself. I hope you won't stop seeking help just because you are back at work. Considering that the person I have been seeing virtually works at the academy, I doubt he will let me fall through the cracks. I will probably transition to in-person sessions instead." Noble hadn't wanted to leave the house before, but now that she was back at work, it made more sense to plan appointments around her new schedule. "Good girl. Or should I say, Master Noble." Julius's eyes crinkled as he dipped his head deferentially. "There is no need to stand on formalities and you know it," Noble chuckled. "But if you really want to be correct, I suppose you could call me by my true name." Julius's eyes grew a little wider. "Lena mentioned you had gotten one but wouldn't tell me what it was. She said you should have that honor. May I?" Noble motioned to a blank sheet of synthetic paper on Julius's desk. He passed it and a writing utensil over for the professor to use. She sketched a few runes on the page before handing it across the table. This is what the spell wrote. It's translated as, Child of Promise. The old man's bushy eyebrows nearly shot to his forehead. Noble smiled. That was the reaction she had been hoping for. While she could do some basic translation, like she had with Theo's message, Noble was nowhere near fluent. Julius, on the other hand, was an expert. Her mentor loved runes, and new ones always gave him a childlike quality to his face. Interesting. Most interesting, he muttered. Pulling out a booklet of handwritten notes from a drawer, he thumbed through many pages until he came to the one he desired. Then he spent many moments in silent contemplation, comparing the professor's writing to his own. "You are sure this line is right there?" he asked without judgment. Noble closed her eyes to focus on the runes behind the spell's translation. "It is perhaps a tad more straight down than what I drew, but yes." "Fascinating." Julius smiled at the page, his eyes glistening. "Care to tell me what has you looking like a child in a sugar shack?" Noble hid her amusement behind a scowl. "Yes, of course. It is your true name after all. Child of Promise is one translation of it, but I find the second one more interesting." Julius turned the page around for her to see. This symbol can mean child or progeny, but it can also refer to one who receives an inheritance. And this one was the one I had to check on. It does mean promise, but it is also an alternative rune for hope. Hope. Like the demon of hope. Noble knew of the kingdom of hope and had read about its tragic ending. Demons didn't have lineages, at least not to Noble's knowledge, so having a true name referring to one would be unheard of as well. Julius shook his head. "It's a different rune. That kind of hope, like the mysterious being, is often better translated as desire. This kind of hope is when you look forward to something that you believe will happen. Like a promise. Which is why the spell translated it to promise rather than hope." Noble understood. The teacher nodded slowly, his smile growing wider. "Exactly. But I will disagree with the spell. Or at the very least, I want to amend its translation. You are not just Child of Promise. You are Inheritor of Hope." Inheritor of Hope. The words resonated in her core for reasons she could not explain. "I am the inheritor of a hope-filled promise." "Seems so." Julius's eyes glistened. "The spell brings death and destruction. What kind of hope can it possibly promise to me or anyone else?" Noble had survived 2 nightmares. If she wanted to transcend, that would mean yet another hellish trial. That promised pain and hardship, not hope. "I don't know," her mentor answered, "but I'm excited to find out." Excitement. Noble didn't feel excited. She felt burdened. What hope could she possibly bring to the world? She thought of her newest attribute, Kingdom Keeper. Though a seemingly passive quality, it also placed some responsibility on her for keeping others safe. That was a tall order. One that Noble wasn't sure she could fulfill. "I am proud of you." Julius leaned forward and offered his hand in congratulations. As Noble took his hand, she felt something change inside her. It was the same warmth she had felt during her interview with Teddy. A loud bang sounded overhead. The tile from the ceiling came crashing down, landing in the chair behind Julius and splintering the seat. It had all happened so fast that neither of them even registered what was happening until it was over. Julius's eyes went wide as he moved out of the way and they both looked up. While the alloy exterior of the building was exceptionally strong to defend against attack, the ceiling between floors was made of more mundane material. Cracks were now lining the ceiling and a piece of it was missing to reveal the synthetic wood of the floor above them. Noble gasped and immediately used her ability to hold up any other parts of the tile that might decide to follow the first. She turned wide eyes on Julius. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Julius furrowed his brow. "I told them this would happen. That visiting lecturer is just too strong. Even his footsteps have been causing cracks in the ceiling since last week. We should probably get out of here and let maintenance know. I would hate for the rest of the tiles to come crashing down on your head." Noble glanced up, pretty sure at least one more was ready to fall. She held it in place. Julius nodded and headed toward the door. "I'm lucky you were here. If I hadn't felt compelled to shake your hand, that would have struck me across the forehead." Noble remembered the moment before the ceiling collapsed. She paled. Maybe, just maybe, luck had nothing to do with it. Short time later, Noble left Julius and the facilities manager to head to her classroom. She was a little shaken. Not because the roof over her head nearly came down on herself and one of the people she valued most in the world. Even if it had completely crashed down around them, it was likely they both would have been fine. Their respective awakened and ascended bodies would have held up against worse than that. No, what bothered Noble was the feeling she had experienced right before the tile fell. The sensation wasn't unpleasant, but it was noticeable. If it hadn't been for the event right afterward, Noble might have entirely forgotten about it. But now she couldn't push it from her mind. What did Julius say? He said he felt compelled to shake her hand. The mentor was more likely to give her a hug of congratulations, but the desk between them prevented that action. Of course, she could just be reading too much into the situation. Her therapist had pointed out that Council's betrayal had made her paranoid. Perhaps that was the case here. Maybe it was merely a coincidence. Human brains looked for patterns in everything, even if there wasn't one. But what if it wasn't paranoia? What if? Calm down. There's nothing to be gained by panicking. Feeling her emotions begin to spiral, Noble decided to push away the thoughts for now. Waiting for the manager of the facility to come and see the damage had taken time, and now the professor was running behind. She hurried to her classroom, only stopping when she reached the door. Someone was already inside. Two someones, if androids were considered beings. Slipping in the door, Noble spied an exasperated young woman who was standing by the professor's desk talking to B2. But what if I feel like? The android pointed to the page in the girl's hand. What you feel does not change what is on the page. The memory has only one enchantment. The sleeper opened her mouth to argue, then, realizing it would be useless, she snapped it shut again. What do you feel? Noble asked from the top of the steps. The pair looked to find a woman with polychromatic eyes staring at them curiously. Realizing she had spooked the sleeper, Noble smiled apologetically as she descended the stairs. Forgive me. I am Professor Noble. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with B2. You seem quite distraught. The sleeper summoned a memory and held it out. It looked like a pair of sandals. The professor leaned down to examine them more closely. Very stylish. What seems to be the trouble? Seal, the girl answered with a dip of her head. And I know that the shoes are supposed to feel like I'm wearing nothing, so they do not weigh me down, but I feel like they have a second enchantment that also gives me energy when I wear them. That is not possible. I ran the analysis and the enchantment doesn't exist, to be stated in a matter-of-fact tone. I see. Noble nodded slowly. Logic and intuition were at odds. It happened sometimes. And with the spell involved. Even more often. Neither party was at fault for disagreeing. The professor hummed softly. I believe you when you say that you feel more energetic while wearing them. But rather than being a separate enchantment, it could be part of the same one, like a side effect. Light feet mean less effort for walking, which would in turn give you more energy than you would have otherwise. Think of it like a secret enchantment. It exists, but it's hidden where not even technology can see. Noble saw the girl's shoulders relax. That makes some sense. My feet feeling good makes the rest of me feel good as well. A hidden boon. Thank you for your help, Professor Noble. You are most welcome, Seal. Will I be seeing you in my seminar shortly? The professor checked the time. If you are teaching, I wouldn't miss it. See you then. Seal bowed before rushing up the stairs between the rows of desks. Sweet girl, Noble commented before turning to see B2's hands on alloy hips. HMPH, the android made a semblance of the human noise. Noble suppressed a laugh. Hello, B2. I'm delighted to see you. I've missed you. Not enough to greet me when you arrived, the android huffed. I was going to wait until we were alone to make our reunion special. I did not mean to hurt your feelings. Noble held out her hands in genuine apology. Androids do not have feelings. B2 flipped back synthetic hair. Welcome back, Professor. No feelings. Right. Then I guess you won't be excited to see my new memories. Noble lowered her hands. B2 held up a finger of objection. I don't have feelings, but I am programmed to be interested in certain topics. Unless being in a nightmare affected your memory, you should know better than anyone that memories are at the top of that list. How did you know? Noble's eyes widened. She had not yet told the android where she had been. With a motion similar to an eye roll, B2 waved her hand dismissively. When I was asked to take over in your stead, they said you had been reassigned to a special project. They must think I have no intelligence, artificial or otherwise. The government files were much more helpful. Noble barely caught her satchel as it slipped off of her shoulder. B2, please tell me you didn't go poking around in classified government documents again. I don't poke. I finessed my way into the system, got what I needed, and left without anyone being the wiser. B2 nodded. What the android said must have been true, or B2 would have been shut down or altered in some way. Yet, the robot was just as sassy as ever. Noble covered her face. What did the government files say? That it was believed that you entered a nightmare after falling through a gate. More recently you confirmed this with an interviewer named Teddy. B2 nodded slowly. You were right. That wasn't poking. That was outright digging. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or horrified. Noble sighed. I cannot help you with that. B2 shrugged. Perhaps both. Setting her bag on the desk, Noble chuckled softly. I suppose that is the simplest solution. At least I don't have to recount my adventures once again. They are already stored in your database. That's true. You had quite an ordeal if Teddy's notes are accurate. The android raised one eyebrow. The professor sighed. It was an unfortunate adventure. I'm glad to be home with you and my family. Noble ran her fingers lovingly across her desk. It was the little things that had the biggest impact. Welcome home, Professor, B2 answered. It is good that you are here. Is that your way of saying you missed me? Noble tilted up one corner of her mouth. B2 gave the professor a sharp look. Don't be silly, now, show me those memories. Noble first summoned the breadcrumbs. As expected, it only had one enchantment which they discerned was called Follow My Lead. I don't need directions. I have a built-in system that will get me anywhere I need to go, B2 pointed out. Is this useful to you? Very. Noble demonstrated the memory by floating around the classroom. It helped me find my way in the nightmare. Unlike you, I don't have an internal compass. Next, Noble held out the golden bracelets she was wearing. Those are nice. The android said noncommittally. Noble laughed. They are a memory. Go ahead and analyze them. I am curious what you find. Running a scan across the bracelets, B2 silently processed the results. A paper printed out on Noble's desk. The professor picked it up and scanned the page. The bands of Crestfall were a transcendent memory of the 4th tier. However, they only had 2 enchantments. Hidden secrets made it so the user's true strength was hidden. In some ways, it was similar to the fraudulent facade in that it hid the wearer's true identity, but it did not make them appear to be a different person. And the second enchantment, Prying Eyes, obscured the person's presence when not being directly perceived. This was why Nickel had found the memory useless to him. The bands were a strong memory nonetheless. The hummingbird's wings was merely a dormant memory, but its Catch Me If You Can enchantment showed great promise. Finally, Noble brought out the Zenith. B2's stance subtly changed. How did you earn this weapon? Noble shut her eyes for a moment. I killed a terror called the Bloom of Doubt. B2 scanned the weapon, printing the results. A supreme weapon with 4 enchantments. The android double-checked the results to confirm. Noble had known the first part but not the second. Nice. One of them made the blade unusually sharp. Noble had noticed it made cuts in things with very little effort. 2 of the others enhanced the agility of the wielder and made the sword strike with increased accuracy. Those 3 were passive enchantments, but the final one required essence. It was also the most powerful. Following the wisdom she gave her students, Noble headed to the polymer chamber in the corner of her classroom. After the incident with her long-lost hammer and the room in Ender's Deep, the professor was extra wary of causing damage to the world around her. As a master, the potential for disaster was even greater when it came to her impact on the mundane world. The chamber was the safest place for her to try something new in the waking world. The professor waited for B2 to secure the door. Are you ready? The new master gripped the sword and lifted it in front of her. I will be monitoring your every action, B2 held the datapad confidently. All right, here goes. Focusing on the zenith, Noble infused the weapon with essence. The beautiful sword became almost unrecognizable as the entire weapon transformed. The tip of the blade became tinged with black, which quickly spread. The edges of the sword, which were already incredibly sharp, looked poised to slice the very fabric of reality in two with a single cut. All around Noble, the air in the chamber became heavier, like it was a moment away from whispering in her ear. The black tinge has poisoned the blade. Noble hummed softly. Interesting. Instinctively, the professor understood what the poison would do. It was different from the straightforward decay that Nickel's dastardly blade could cause. The enchantment of the zenith was far more sinister. The poison wasn't for the body, it was for the mind, and possibly even the soul. Noble realized that each hit that landed and drew blood would do damage to the opponent's mind, much like the bloom of doubt had attacked her deepest fears. Did nightmare creatures have fears? They must, for Noble often felt it mixed in with their hatred for the uncorrupted. If that doubt were amplified each time the zenith struck it, that could do a lot of damage even to extremely powerful abominations. Pushing into the enchantment, Noble watched the beautiful blade turn completely black. It looked ready to drip with the poisonous venom covering it like a mercurial blanket. Noble felt the sword feeding off of her essence. It was exhilarating. The professor had never experienced anything quite like it. What would happen if she gave it her full effort? Sure, it was practically humming now with dark energy, but if she could just pump a little more power into it. Professor Noble, B2 broke through the woman's concentration. Not yet, B2. Using her ability, Noble balanced the zenith and then made a single swipe through the air. It moved so smoothly that the professor felt like she was holding nothing at all. But the force from the swing was anything but soft. Noble knew that contact with the polymer side would be putting her chamber to the ultimate test. And she wasn't sure what would come out on top. The professor felt so powerful. Would this weapon be beyond what her chamber could handle? Should she try? With a little more power. Professor. B2's voice blasted and reverberated off the polymer walls. What? Noble looked fiercely at her android. What is so important that you are interrupting my experiment? B2 set down the datapad and touched the chamber door. The zenith is indeed a powerful weapon, perhaps the most powerful we've ever examined. But, the professor looked at the android. Noble's eyes spoke of untold emotions swirling within their depths. But what? I cannot help but notice that the final enchantment uses a lot of your essence to keep it activated. B2 took a step into the chamber and pushed gently on Noble's hand. Ceasing her flow of essence into the zenith, Noble lowered the sword with a gasp. She hadn't really noticed how much energy it was pulling from her until she stopped. The power she had felt while the enchantment was active was overwhelming. Now, Noble felt drained. If she had kept going, eventually she would have hit essence exhaustion and likely caused herself some harm. Thankfully, she was a master now. The feeling of being a little drained would not last very long. Still, it was good to know how the enchantment would affect her before going into a real battle. I'll use the enchantment sparingly. Thank you, B2. It is a nice weapon. Very befitting an esteemed master. The android nodded slowly. That is good. At least you brought back some nice gifts from your vacation. It is good that you gave me some reward for having to do all your work for so long. Vacation. Noble choked on the word. Yes, that is what you humans call time off from work, is it not? B2 raised a robotic eyebrow. Sometimes, but, Noble wasn't sure where to begin the correction and the android didn't seem interested in receiving the information anyway. Now that you are back, I assume you will be taking back your classes as primary lecturer. B2 motioned toward the desk. Dismissing the zenith, Noble nodded. Of course, I am looking forward to. Good. I have been told my teaching is in need of refinement. Though I don't know what could be more refined than an android giving factual information, B2 huffed. I'm sure it is just a matter of preference. Don't read too much into it, Noble hid her smile. Just the same, I will watch your lecture more closely, B2 nodded slowly. You don't have to do that. Noble wasn't sure how to say that compassion and feeling were not exactly something that could be learned. Not that her assistant would have listened. I don't have to, but I will. I am sure I will make an excellent student. The android took a spot at the closest desk. Soon, the other chairs began to fill as well. Whether from the reporters out front, her interaction with Seal, or some other source, word had spread about the professor's return to the academy. The desks were not only filled, but students lined the walls at the top of the terraced seats. Soon they were even sitting on the stairs of the aisle. Eventually, there were so many people that Noble made someone at the back shut the door. Clear the aisle. I don't want a safety hazard in my classroom. I might be able to float, but the rest of you shouldn't run the risk of being trampled. Noble smiled to soften her command. A ripple of laughter flowed through the students as they made narrow walkways among the crowd. It was better than nothing. I know they are just humoring me, but I'll take whatever I can get. It had been more than 2 months since Noble had set foot in her classroom and longer than that since her last lecture. With all eyes on her, she suddenly felt very nervous. She could feel all her students' anticipation, some far more eager than others. But it was clear they had all come to see her, and unlike Queen Bee, Noble had no mask to hide behind. So she forced a smile and the words from her mouth. Good morning, sleepers. I am Professor Noble. In case you are unsure what room you wandered into on this fall day, you have found your way into memory assessment and utilization. The statements came easier than she expected. Years of practice could not be wiped away so easily. Taking a relieved breath, the professor continued. How many of you have a memory in your possession? Every hand in the room shot up. Noble nodded as her gaze moved across the room. The only one who did not have a hand in the air was the android in the front row. Thankfully, B2 was too busy taking notes to notice the slight amusement on Noble's face. Good. Then we will have plenty of material to work with. Noticing the curious glance of those near the front, Noble cleared her throat lightly. I will start off today by introducing my faithful android, B2. My assistant will be taking notes right now, but should you need a memory examined or any of the other resources when I am absent, B2 will assist you. The android turned around completely at the waist and waved. If not for the uncanny way B2 was facing backward, the action would have looked natural. The professor's hand instinctively went to her stomach as she suppressed the queasy feeling of imagining how such a bizarre position would feel. Thank you, B2. I had forgotten how flexible you are, Noble said with a pained smile. You also didn't mention that I am an excellent bodyguard and proficient substitute lecturer. B2 supplied. A ripple of laughter passed through the students. Noble's smile turned genuine. I'll be sure to include that in my next introduction. Now, while all the other hands lowered, one stayed up and began moving side to side, distracting Noble from her typical speech. Rather than ignore it, the professor pointed at the unorthodox interruption. Yes, Noble paused with her outstretched hand. Lorne. The man in the dark hat seemed almost giddy. Noble tried not to be off-put by his exuberance. Good to meet you, Lorne. Did you have a question? Noble folded her hands neatly in front of her. Lorne stared and smiled a little too brightly at the sound of his name. It wasn't until the person next to him elbowed him that he decided to continue. Oh, it's just an honor to meet you, Queen, Professor Noble. Lorne stumbled over his words. He pushed on his hat, revealing a silver strand of hair underneath. Will you let us know your office hours? You know, in case we would prefer to work with you directly. Lorne looked poised to write down anything she said in response. Noble chuckled lightly. Let me see if I can answer your questions first during this lecture. If not, I will see if I can schedule a time to look at the memory that concerns you. Quite an eager one. Glad B2 wasn't offended by his preference to meet with me. Noble straightened her back. And since I am guessing that none of you have had a class with me before, I will be starting with the absolute basics of memories. If you are looking for a more advanced class, you may want to come back at a later time. No one moved, which disappointed Noble a little. She had hoped to thin the crowd so she could focus on those needing the most help next. It was also a little flattering. Certainly, many of these sleepers did not need to hear the basics, yet they wanted to hear her speak anyway. All right then, let's continue. Who can tell me the 4 main types of memories? Dozens of hands shot into the air. Lorne even went so far as to make an ooh sound in order to attract her attention. Noble selected the student next to him. The girl looked significantly younger, with a dewy-eyed innocence that tugged at Noble's heart. Yes, you, me. The girl's lovely eyes opened a little wider at being picked. She sat up in her seat to try to project her voice. Thank you, ma'am. I'm Talitha, and I believe categorizations are armor, weapon, charm, and tool. The lifting of her voice at the end of her sentence made her words sound tentative. So nervous. Excellent, Talitha. You are correct. The majority of memories will fall into one of these categories. Some will actually fall into more than one. I'll give you an example. Noble allowed a rain of sparks to form around her. Everyone leaned forward in their seats. But when the loyal tabard formed over her clothes, she could feel as well as see her student's disappointment. What? She asked reflexively. A sleeper on the front row slowly raised his stylus. I am not sure about everyone else, but I was just hoping to see your Dreamscape armor of your estoc. Oh, the professor saw a sea of nodding heads. Of course, she knew they hadn't come to see Professor Noble. Lorne's slip-up in his first question had made that clear. All of them were here to see Queen Bee. And why not? If she were a sleeper, then wouldn't she seek out who she perceived to be the best at the academy and learn at their feet? Perhaps we can look at that armor later, Noble offered. But my estoc was destroyed in my recent nightmare by a terror. The students began to whisper. The air hummed with the excitement of such a revelation. Queen Bee had lost her signature weapon. How did you survive? Did your echo help you? Someone called out loudly from the back row. Did you get a new memory to replace your estoc? Another voice overlapped the first. Suddenly the room was popping with questions from all directions. Noble held up a hand and the class went silent. Her usual lecture was not going to cut it today. Her goal had been to build rapport with the students and hopefully provide some information that would help them in the dream realm. Noble heard her communicator buzz on her desk. It was probably Fort wanting to see how her first class went, not realizing it had just begun. She tucked the device in her drawer. She would write him back at lunch. Shutting the drawer, Noble pulled out the chair and hovered over it. She studied the expectant faces carefully. It seems we have different goals today. I want to teach you about memories and you want to ask about Queen Bee. The professor dismissed the loyal tabard and frowned. How about a compromise? For every piece of information I am able to give you about memories, I will answer one question. But only if you are paying attention and learning. Deal. More than 100 heads nodded in unison. Great. Noble dismissed the tabard and smiled softly. Now I need a volunteer. Don't worry. It won't hurt, probably. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Noble smiled at her proposal. She would be foolish not to use her fame to make her classes easier and more efficient. There was only a little time she had left before the solstice, and she needed to connect with her students and impart her knowledge quickly. This solution did both. Yes, you in the back. Come on down. Akuma, ma'am, the tall, muscular young man replied as he was motioned forward. The volunteer turned out to have a pair of 6-league boots that allowed him to walk great distances with a single step. Thankfully, Noble was able to stop Akuma before he could demonstrate and possibly make a hole in the wall or hurt herself. This is one of the few times I advise trying this somewhere outside of my chamber. I might be able to find a safe location after class. Akuma nodded, dismissed the memory, and returned to his seat. You know just about everything. Lorne gushed. Are you taking on research assistants at this time? The professor studied the man's face. Something about the stilted way he spoke bothered her. His slouch also felt like he was trying to mask his height. Noble shook her head. I am not looking for an assistant at this time. And even if I were, sleepers should be focused on the upcoming solstice first and foremost. Of course, Lorne looked away. The solstice. But after that, we can have this discussion after the winter solstice. Noble cut him off. Now, where were we? Noble went on to explain her philosophy for how to handle memories and that practice makes perfect. She even managed to diffuse yet another incendiary memory in her blast chamber. It never fails. The ones sleepers cannot figure out always blow up. Noble laughed internally. Please come back and practice before December, she told the student seriously. That little bomb might save your life if you can use it effectively. Noble turned back to the room and frowned. Was it her imagination or had Lorne moved forward a couple of rows and displaced another student? Could he not hear well enough where he was? Noble raised her voice. The same goes for all of you. Know your memories inside and out. They are just tools for survival and are only as good as the one who is wielding them. Cunning will save you more often than brute strength. So exercise the mind and the body regularly. Things went surprisingly smoothly for the professor's first lecture back. It helped that everyone wanted to be there. Noble was in her element, and the students were eager to absorb her wisdom. Time passed quickly. Lunchtime came. Noble expected at least some of the students to answer the call of hunger. They weren't required to be there at all, so it was reasonable to assume they would leave when they were bored. Yet no one moved. Only B2 returned silently to recharge in the special alcove. Noble wasn't sure how long it had been since the android had a rest. B2's power could last for days, but the battery was not unlimited. Yet even that movement at the front of the room did not deter any of the human listeners. It was strange and humbling to have so many young people's undivided attention. So the professor tried very hard not to disappoint. In between her mini lessons, Noble fielded questions about Queen Bee. Some of them had to do with her time in the Dreamscape. Others had to do with her heroic escapades defending the Nightmare Gate. Noble quickly learned who she could and could not trust to ask thoughtful questions based on their emotions when she looked their way. Some people were just weird. It was one thing to ask for an autograph after class and quite another to request other souvenirs. Fortunately, those questions were few. What was the hardest part of being in the second nightmare? A student with eyes like emeralds asked most recently. Hard. It was all hard. The professor felt her eyes swirl. But there was no need to freeze them in their usual blue hue. Everyone knew who she was now, and the turmoil in her eyes reflected the feeling in her soul. These teens needed to see her sincerity. I didn't choose to conquer the second nightmare. It was never something I sought, just like most of you didn't seek out infection by the nightmare spell. Noble laughed dryly and continued. But you asked what was the hardest part. That is easy to answer. For you see, when you enter a nightmare, you leave your family, everyone, and everything that you love behind. I had no warning when I fell into that gate. No mental preparation or training. No tired feeling to let me know to expect the worst. Noble smiled faintly. So, the hardest part was the suddenness of it all. I was not ready. The moment came like a thief in the night. The professor paused to collect her thoughts. The room was deathly silent. When she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. Some of you may choose to enter the seat of a second nightmare, and all of you will be forced into the wilds of the dream realm on the solstice. My advice to you is, do not end up like me. Be vigilant. Be ready. Be prepared. Applause rose as Lorne stood from his desk. How had he made it to the front row? And when had he taken over B2's seat? The man acted like he had never been anywhere else. We bow to your superior knowledge, O Queen of Bees. Lorne stepped off of the final step and came forward and addressed the room. You should all listen to this woman. I have been following her for years. Why, the last time I was this close. We have met before. Noble furrowed her brow. As if you could forget meeting me, Lorne laughed. Professor. Talitha called out from somewhere in the crowd. I don't think that man is a sleeper. Focusing on the man's presence, Noble had to agree. He was too strong to be a sleeper and had good control over his essence. He was already an awakened. While awakened were welcome to continue their education at the academy, most did so in separate seminars. You are awakened, Lorne. Noble tried to turn the name over in her mind. I knew it. You do remember me. I know I changed my hair, but I knew you'd never forget my winning smile. Noble's eyes opened wider, but her face remained neutral. Her voice when it spoke again was firm. Class is over until tomorrow. Everyone go have lunch with my blessing. If anyone tries to say the cafeteria is closing, tell them QueenBee sent you. There was some grumbling in the room. Many of the sleepers were reluctant to leave. It took a sharp look and a small emotional jolt to get people moving. Slowly, the classroom emptied. Talitha paused at the door. She held her bag tightly in her hand as she gave Noble a concerned look. Professor. The older woman held up her hand. Later, sleeper Talitha. We will talk soon, but not now. If you see awakened Rock, please let him know I have someone special I would like for him to meet. Talitha nodded. Yes, Professor. The young lady hurried out of the room and allowed the door to shut. The professor and her guest were alone. Noble strode casually toward her desk but did not take her eyes off Lorne. He smiled brightly at her. I'm glad that you remember me. Noble nodded slowly. Of course I do. You're my biggest fan. I'm the biggest and best fan QueenBee has ever had. Lorne agreed easily. He took off his hat and allowed his silver hair to tumble out to his shoulders. You were outside earlier with the reporters. There had been so many people that Noble hadn't memorized all of the emotional signatures. But one whiff of the man's strong cologne told Noble that he was undeniably the same one who had been escorted for approaching her. I saw you being taken away. How had he made it past the front gate after that? The hat must have been a memory that obscured his appearance from them. She saw no way that they would let him through otherwise. Those pesky guards. They couldn't understand the special connection we have. Lorne clicked his tongue. Though I shouldn't be too upset. If they have only ever seen the memory you have of me, then they would recognize my new look. Ah, yes, that memory, how could I ever forget that? Noble recalled the crazed fan who had jumped the barrier to give her a memory replica of himself. The little black-haired figurine was uncanny and disturbing. The very thought of it ever having rested in her soul sea was upsetting. Noble had destroyed the abomination almost immediately, but the name of the gifter was forever ingrained in her mind. Noble pursed her lips. You are bow to the bee. The Dreamscape fanatic beamed. Guilty as charged. Though, I suppose that will not be true for long. I'll have a better name now that we are a dynamic duo. Lorne tapped his chin. I'll have to commission a new figure for the occasion. Breezing past the man's strange obsession with figurines, Noble tried to wrap her head around Lorne's assertion. We are what? The professor was genuinely flabbergasted. Was she hearing things? Fireshing might have prevented me from entering the nightmare to help you, but her jealousy might have been a blessing in disguise. As an awakened I can devote all my time to helping you. As a master, I would have had too many other responsibilities. Noble was too confused for words. But it seemed Lorne didn't need her input for this conversation. Now I know what you are thinking. You cannot participate in the Dreamscape anymore. Lucky you, I wasn't talking about the Dreamscape at all. I am proposing a new alliance in the waking world. We can be heroes just like you were at the gate. As QueenBee and King Wasp, we can be unstoppable. I've always felt a deep connection between us. With a little work, I think this may be the beginning of a new legacy clan. Just when I thought this man was crazy, he graduates to insane. Start a legacy clan. With you. I don't know what you have heard, but I'm married. I already have children. Noble hoped the realization might throw some cold water on the man's ideas. Lorne smiled sadly. I admit I was a little disappointed when I discovered this. But then I realized it is a problem that is easily overcome. The fanatic tapped his forehead. I have a plan to take care of it all and give you a fresh start. Don't worry, QueenBee. Nothing will stand in the way of you and your dreams. Noble blinked. The long silver locks and light eyes were replaced with blonde hair and a sharp gaze. A familiar smirk of triumph graced the man's face. Ender. It hadn't been enough for counsel to torture her in the nightmare. He continued to invade her sleep even now. Maybe this was a dream. It had to be. If she tried hard enough, she would wake up and Fort would be right beside her. Pinching herself, Noble winced. No, it wasn't a dream. If the self-inflicted pain was not enough, the professor distinctly remembered waking up this morning and all that transpired. How had Ender broken through into the waking world? Did he have some intangible power to break out of the spell and enter the waking world? At least in the other places, he could threaten her, but there was no way for him to reach her husband or children. But now, you will not hurt my family. Noble's words were both a threat and a promise. She had fought too long and hard. There was no way that she was going to lose the ones most precious to her when she had just gotten them back. I will do anything to keep them safe. Hurt. The word, coupled with the strong cologne covering the man like a cloud, brought Noble back to her senses. Gone was the visage of Ender, replaced by awakened Lorne. She wasn't being chased by the same man through time and space. She was being chased by two different men. Was that better or worse? What is wrong with these men? What is wrong with me that I attract these men? You think I will hurt your family? Lorne repeated. I wouldn't make them hurt at all. That would be disrespectful to you. The stalker cooed softly. It would be all nice and clean and you would be able to live up to your full potential. Something inside Noble snapped. The two men might not be the same person physically, but mentally they were one and the same. Who are you to decide what my potential is? You think you know me. You don't. Sparks swirled around the professor's hand. The shining zenith came into being. The delicate blossom almost immediately turned black. Noble's expression darkened. Do you think you can just come in here and tell me what to do? Threaten my family? You have another thing coming. Lorne's fingers flinched. He was about to summon a memory when he saw the blade turn black. Instinctively, he lunged to disarm Noble of the weapon and instead received a deep wound across his hand. You feel that? That is a warning. Listen to the fear invading your body. I have defeated stronger men than you. Noble's eyes were filled with fire. You will leave my family alone. But my plans, Lorne gasped as he was lifted off of the ground. What plans? Noble dangled the man-like curing meat over her head. The sword filled her with unrestrained power as it roiled with inky blackness. Lorne remained silent for a moment. What was he hiding? Have you already started your plans? The thought filled Noble with righteous anger. Who would dare hurt the family of someone they claimed to admire? Tell me what you have done. Lorne's emotions spiked. I. Losing her patience, Noble swung the zenith through the air. Only by pulling back at the last moment did she restrain from delivering a killing blow. The dangling awakened received a shallow on his arm. He cried out in agony. Please, no. Stop. The world around him went in and out of focus. I just wanted us to be a team. You have to believe me. But Noble did not heed his cry. She lowered his head upside down just enough to let the zenith come within a millimeter of her stalker's neck. Her eyes were filled with hatred for him. Start talking. Tell me your plans. Now. Noble pressed the zenith closer. Or else. Fort tore through the academy grounds with multiple awakened government agents in tow. His morning inquiry had yielded many results. Not only had he tracked down the name of the person behind the comments, he had found out many more things. Things that he needed to tell Noble immediately. But that was the problem. He hadn't been able to get a hold of his wife for hours, and when he finally resorted to trying to communicate through B2, the android was inexplicably unavailable. Usually, the government could force a machine to come back online, but through bad timing or design, the android was not able to be woken. Fort had contacted the school, but his worries were met with comfort, not action. The academy guards had assured him that things were quiet now that the reporters were gone. Even Julius had believed Fort was overreacting, informing the director via message that Noble was still teaching a class. But nothing would stop the feeling in Fort's gut. He needed to see Noble with his own eyes. Warn her. So with permission, he left work and headed across town in a hurry. Sensing the tension, the PTV driver sped, only stopping when the vehicle reached its destination. Fort didn't even wait for the driver to fully stop, throwing open the door and tumbling forward toward the awakened academy's entrance. Just as he got to the academy gates, he got a call that made his blood run cold. What? Are you sure? The director nearly yelled into his communicator. His face darkened, sending a small chill down the awakened guard's spine. Come with me, he ordered the sentries. The men didn't question the director, listening to his instructions as they went. None of them knew the exact location of Noble's classroom, and now they chased after the mundane human who ran across the campus like a madman. How is there no security in the building? Fort yelled at no one in particular. He crossed the compound and burst into his wife's hall with perspiration on his brow. He was winded, but there was no way he was about to slow down. Third door on the left, he told the awakened guards behind him. Since they were not as tired as their mundane boss, they ran past the director at breakneck speed. They opened the shut door and then they froze. Is she not in there? What is wrong with Olive? Pushing past them, Fort made his way into the classroom. Then, he, too, slowed to a stop. The professor had her back to them, but the anger was coming off of her in waves. The air felt so thick that Fort felt like he might choke. Dangling in the air, a silver-haired man was hanging upside down and gasping for breath. Blood trickled from his hand. A sword coated with black liquid floated dangerously close to his neck. What have you done? Noble screamed. The sword grazed the man's neck, causing a new trickle. The man cried out in pain. Nothing. Nothing yet, I swear. The professor swayed slightly at his answer. You better hope that is true, because if not. The sword moved away from Lorne's neck, preparing to swing in one clean motion. The woman's eyes were filled with darkness. It mirrored the tenebrous liquid dripping from her deadly blade. What had happened to his beautiful wife? Noble. Fort rasped, finally finding his voice. The professor wheeled on her heels, the zenith hovering perilously in place as she let it go. Fort. Noble's stormy eyes cleared. The color returned to her pallid face. Fort. Tears stained Noble's cheeks as she floated across the room. The moment her arms wrapped around Fort's neck, the zenith dissolved into a rain of sparks and Lorne dropped to the ground. But Noble ignored the silver-haired man's grunt. All she cared about was her husband. Hugging him softly, she stifled a sob. You're here. And you're safe. I was about to say the same about you. Fort kissed her forehead gently. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I take it that is Lorne. Noble nodded. He's my stalker from the Dreamscape. He said he was going to harm you and the kids. The kids are fine. Fort brought out his communicator to show Noble. I heard from those watching them, and our kids are still at school and don't know that anything is wrong. Fort was confident on this point, which calmed Noble considerably. How did Rock call you? Noble had sent one of the students for help when Lorne revealed himself. And when Noble had been unable to reactivate B2, the professor had assumed she was alone in this fight. We tracked the messages from the article to Lorne's communicator and then pinpointed his signal to here. I came as soon as I could. It seems I was too late. I'm sorry. Fort apologized. No, you were just in time. Noble hated to admit what she might have done if he hadn't arrived. She had nearly lost control. I was so scared I might lose you when I just got you back. It will take more than an obsessive awaken for that to happen, Fort smiled faintly. I'm harder to get rid of than an unlucky coin. By Noble's desk, the guards rushed to restrain Lorne as he regained his balance. As soon as the zenith disappeared, so did the intensity in the air. The shallow cuts which had induced panic oozed slightly but were slowly healing. Unfocused, Lorne's sunken eyes looked desperately at the professor. His emotions were a jumble of indescribable frustration, longing, and bitterness. We could have been, he began. No, we will never be anything, Noble corrected him. I am already taken. Fort squeezed her hand, giving her much-needed strength. Get him out of my wife's classroom, the director ordered. There's a PTV out front that can take him to the proper facility. The guards lifted the disheveled and bleeding Lorne from the ground and shoved him up the stairs. The couple stepped aside as the prisoner was escorted from the room, taking all his whirlwind of emotion with him. Lorne glared at his rival. Suddenly, in a moment of rage, he spat at Fort with all his might. The saliva, which threatened to land on the director's chest, went white at the last second and bubbled on the ground with its acid. The guards tackled Lorne to the floor. Seeing his poison had missed, Lorne growled and pulled against the restraints. Filthy mundane. You don't deserve her. Fort laughed dryly. You act like I don't know that. His voice grew firm. Gag him. The man can spit acid. Feeling his wife shiver, Fort hugged Noble more tightly. Shish, it's okay. Awakened Lorne has several warrants out for his arrest. You are not his first target. He won't be out of prison for a very long time. Everything is all right now. Why does this keep happening to me? For a moment I really thought he was coming after me again, but Lorne was just another crazed psychopath. The professor spoke her worry into her husband's shoulder. What is wrong with me? Fort felt his wife's heart beating wildly against his chest. He sighed. Nothing is wrong with you. You are a light in the darkness. People are drawn to you like a moth to flames. Once in a while, one of the moths needs to be put down because they are insane. Though having it happen twice is really impressive. You are basically irresistible. And I'm so glad you chose me. There's never been any competition. You keep me grounded, remember. My home is with you. Noble took a deep breath, inhaling her husband's scent to calm herself. Thank you for coming. I can always count on you. Fort glanced down at the floor and winced. The hole that bore into the ground would have easily bored into his chest. I should be the one to thank for saving my life yet again. The director rubbed his wife's back gently. That spit almost got me. Noble looked down at the hole and her face paled. What is it? Fort felt her stiffen. I didn't react fast enough to stop that acid from hitting you. Noble bit her lip. Are you saying you aren't responsible for that weird turn of the projectile? Noble paused before speaking again. Quite the contrary. I think it was completely my fault. Fort hid his strange expression as he pulled his wife away from the doorway. One of the men with him had secured the entrance, and he wanted whatever was said next not to be overheard. What do you mean it is all your fault? You had no way of knowing that crazed lunatic was behind the comments on the article, did you? Fort was genuinely confused. What? No. Noble rubbed her forehead. How can I explain? She searched for the words. Take your time. Fort brushed back her hair from her face. I will restart B2. I think that fool found a way to short-circuit your assistant. That explains why the switch on my desk didn't work. I thought maybe the battery was drained. Noble watched the director go over to the wall panel and press the appropriate buttons. The covering shifted to the side, releasing the android from the wall. Danger! Danger, Noble! B2 nearly took off Fort's head in the mad dash from the hidey hole. Everything is taken care of. Fort ducked as he spoke. Where is he? The android scanned the room. He is in custody and will not hurt you or anyone else again. Fort remained calm. He knew B2 would only take a moment to catch up to speed. Noble touched the android's arm gently. Are you all right? The intensity in B2's eyes lessened when no threat was found. Other than needing a new wire or two, I'm just the same as always. The professor sighed, relieved. Good. I wouldn't forgive myself if he had done something to permanently damage you. Huh. As if he could. Synthetic hair flipped through the air indignantly. I will get someone to repair what I bypassed soon, Fort assured the android. But for now, can you watch the door while I have a moment alone with my wife? B2 nodded and headed to the door. You know the distance won't matter when it comes to being able to hear us, Noble reminded him as B2 ascended the stairs. I don't care. I want to know what you meant before. What had you looking like you saw a ghost? Fort ran his thumb across his wife's cheek. Something is going on with me. You mean that crazed look in your eye when you were dangling Lorne? The director immediately regretted his choice of wording when Noble scowled. What look? I know I lost control a little when Lorne threatened you, but did I really look insane? Insane? No. You know what? Never mind. You tell me what you wanted to. Fort decided to let the matter drop. Swallowing, Noble tried to make sense of her day. Well, it started this morning. I went to see Julius. The ceiling fell above his head and the only reason he missed being hit was because he was leaning forward to shake my hand. Fort knitted his brow and then smiled softly. Then it was lucky you were there. That's what he said also. Only he mentioned he felt compelled to move toward me when the calamity occurred. Compelled. Noble ran her fingers through her hair. That is odd choice of word. Fort wasn't sure what else to say. There's more, that man. Lorne. Noble took in a sharp breath. I could tell he was trouble when he came in, but I thought he was just overzealous. I guess he was in the end. The moment I realized he was more than an enthusiastic fanboy, I knew I needed to act quickly. The director listened intently to his wife's words. He was angry at himself that he had not gotten there in time after learning that the extreme fanatic had decided to act on his crazy fantasies. While he kicked himself for letting his wife go to work, he also knew that he couldn't have been able to stop her from coming to the academy that morning. Reading his thoughts, Noble reached out and squeezed his hand. I was never in any real danger. Even Lorne should have known that he could not overpower a master if it came to that. Or perhaps because of my bracelets, he thought I was weaker than I am. Either way, he was delusional. Sighing, the woman continued. I wasn't worried for myself, but for the sleepers who were in my class. You had sleepers in here with you. They should have helped you subdue him. Fort pressed his lips together. Noble shook her head. I sent them away. Don't you see? Lorne couldn't hurt me, but depending on his power, he could have decimated them without blinking an eye. They were entrusted into my care. I had to keep them safe no matter what. So I dismissed class. Noble dropped her eyes as she remembered. I felt Lorne's emotions spike. Just when I knew he was going to put up a fight about losing his audience, I felt something. Something. Was it a good or bad something? Fort held onto his wife's hand before she could pull it away. His warm touch gave Noble strength. Not good or bad. It was like a pull. The moment I cared for the student's safety, I felt it. I cannot explain it, but when I moved away from the door and toward my desk, I pulled Lorne's attention from the other people. Almost like he forgot about them entirely. Even when Talitha spoke to me and I sent her to get help, it was like he didn't hear her. It was weird. Noble turned to look at the top of the stairs. The spot in the floor had finally stopped growing. And then there was just now. I wasn't fast enough to react. All I had was a thought for your safety. The moment Lorne threatened you and the kids, my mind went crazy to protect you. I hate to think what I might have done if you hadn't arrived when you did. Then don't think about it. Fort didn't want the beautiful woman to feel guilt for something that hadn't occurred. But I was thinking about it, even when they were taking Lorne out of the classroom. I would have done anything to protect our children and you. So when Lorne spat, I felt the same sort of pull as I did with Julius and my students. Then, inexplicably, the acid moved away from your chest and landed on the floor instead. Fort tried to process her words. You mean that you think you can change reality? I have enough evidence to consider that I am affecting it, Noble answered carefully. What? How? Did something change? The questions tumbled out of the director's mouth. His curiosity was almost as intense as Noble's own. I'm not sure, but I think it has to do with my new attribute, Kingdom Keeper. The runes say that others are safer under my care. Noble tried keep her voice even. So by worrying about someone, they are automatically safer. The director looked deeply into the woman's eyes. She nodded slowly. I think my emotions impact who is protected and who is not. I know that if I had tried to kill Lorne just now, I would have succeeded. Noble's emotions had always been intense. But with the sword in hand and her fear for the safety of others, she has nearly lost all sense of reason. It was too close of a call. At least it was over now and everyone was safe. The psychopath would end up where he couldn't hurt anyone again. Things could have gone considerably worse. Kingdom Keeper. There was more meaning in the attribute than she had initially realized. Placing her head in her hand, Noble released a groan. This is horrible. What do you mean it's horrible? Your caring keeps people safe. That's wonderful. Fort hugged his wife. I always knew your love was a superpower all on its own. It seems the spell agrees with me. Noble winced. The spell. What was it doing to her? First, she received the true name, meaning either that she was a child of promise or an inheritor of hope, and then she got an attribute which meant that she could keep others safe by caring about them. Oh, and there was that evolved attribute that said some nonsense about the world bending to her will. She had nearly forgotten that little detail. Altogether, the professor felt the weight of a mountain bearing down on her shoulders. How was she supposed to hold up against it? It's too much, Noble spoke through her fingers. Fort gently pulled his wife's hands away from her face. What is the pressure? I can feel it pressing down on me from all sides. It's like the spell expects me to be something more than I am. I want to be a wife and mother, and a professor and duelist in my free time. But now I have to care about everyone and carry some kind of promise. Suddenly every feeling I have and move I make might mean life or death for someone else. Noble's head spun. The director smothered a grin. Isn't that a little dramatic? Is it? The professor turned the question back on him. What if I had been angry with you or somehow stopped loving you when Lorne tried to hit you with his aspect? You might be the one with a hole in your chest instead of a hole in the ground. You could never stop loving me any more than I could stop caring about you. It's impossible. Fort laughed softly. Unable to deny his logic, Noble reluctantly grinned. Okay, fine. You will always be safe. Her smile faded, but I cannot keep everyone safe all the time. Nor should you. Your attributes may have changed, but your responsibilities haven't. It is still both of our jobs to make our little part of humanity better than we found it. If you keep this in mind, you have already far exceeded your quota for life. You could retire, and no one would complain. Fort nudged Noble gently. But you would never retire from being helpful, so these tools are just blessings to make your life easier. Taking a deep breath, Noble forced a smile. She didn't exactly agree with the director's assessment, but it was far nicer to accept his explanation than worry that she was being set up for something she never wanted nor asked for. How is it that you always know just the right thing to say to make me feel better? She eyed him curiously. If I didn't know otherwise, I would say you're secretly an awakened and your aspect is soothing my soul. Sorry to disappoint, but my talent is 100% mundane. The man shrugged. However, it is always available to you anytime you need it. Thank you for everything. Noble rested her head lightly on Fort's shoulder and wrapped her arms gently around his shoulders. Fort needed no more encouragement. He lifted her off of the ground a little higher as he caught her up in his arms. Anything for you. I know you aren't a damsel in distress, but that doesn't stop me from wanting to defend you at all costs. You saved me today just by being all right. Noble released her husband. I owe you so much. What kind of currency are we talking about here? Fort winked, causing Noble to blush. But before Noble could stutter out an answer, she was mercifully interrupted. Professor. B2 had cracked the door. The sound of the android's voice was calm but wary. What is it? Noble kept the concern out of her voice. There are 2 men out here to see you. The android kept the door barely open, ready to shut it at a moment's notice. Fort stepped in front of his wife, ready to send away anyone who might disturb her. But before he could issue the command, Noble patted his shoulder lightly. Who is it? A solid academy instructor and a boorish legacy. B2 answered cryptically. Nodding, Noble patted any remnants of tears away from her cheeks. Send in Instructor Rock, and ask our other guest to wait a moment. Rushing past B2, the burly battle instructor barreled into the room. Professor Noble, are you all right? Worry was written all over the man's face. Noble smiled at his concern. I'm fine. Everyone is fine other than the need for a few new wires. A student, Talitha, I think, came and told me she thought you were in need of help. I came as soon as I could and found all the security in the hall. Rock gave a nod of recognition to Fort. I see you are in good company now. It's good to see you, Instructor Rock. The director shook the other man's hand. Yes, things are under control now. I am glad to hear it. Rock scanned the room. A few of the desks were out of place and there was a hole in the floor. The instructor frowned. May I ask what happened? You'll hear about it soon enough most likely. A crazed fan interrupted my class. The situation has been handled, and no one was seriously hurt. Noble tried to downplay what had occurred. She of all people knew what could happen if the battle master got riled up. It was why she had asked for his help over anyone else's. Rock stayed silent for a moment, studying the pair before him. He could see from the couple's demeanors that the situation had rattled them. But in the end, he gave a curt nod. I see. Would you like me to notify the administration of this development? I would hate to leave them out of the conversation on how to improve our safety measures. Really, there wasn't much that could be done. Awakened were allowed in the academy, so even though the man had been previously removed from the premises, he would have found a way in sooner or later. Still, it would be good to have some protocol in place for the future. Not that crazy awakened crashing courses would ever be a common occurrence. At least, Noble hoped not. I would appreciate it if you notified them, Rock. Thank you. You are always so helpful. Noble dipped her head in gratitude. Her eyes softened. I will miss you when you leave. You are leaving. Fort was pulled from his private thoughts by the statement. The battle instructor nodded. After the solstice, I will challenge the second nightmare. Someone inspired me. Rock shot the professor a half smile. She inspires me too. Fort placed his hand on his chest before holding it out once more. I wish you well on your trial. I hope to be congratulating you soon. I appreciate the vote of confidence. Rock stood a little straighter. If there is nothing else. The instructor made a slight bow and headed up the stairs. He will be a good master, Fort nodded after Noble's colleague. I agree. The professor smiled wistfully. Like many awakened, Rock made the world a better place. She was lucky to know him. Professor. B2 imitated a human cough to get the woman's attention. What? Oh, yes. Noble's eyes opened a little wider. She had almost forgotten. Taking a seat behind her desk, Noble motioned toward the door. Please send in our other guest. 2 opened the door wide enough to admit a single person. The boorish vassal of Clan Valor, the android announced officially. A smartly dressed young man entered the room. His hair was neatly cut and slicked back to give him a polished appearance befitting an awakened. Hearing his introduction, the blonde legacy winced. That isn't exactly how I wanted to be announced, he said politely. I only mentioned my boar and valor so that the guards would let me through to see the professor. Awakened Jeremy. Noble welcomed the young man graciously into her classroom. Either you are early for our appointment or it is much later than I thought. I am a few minutes early. It does not look good for a representative of Clan Valor to be late. Jeremy dipped his head politely. Then you did well, Noble understood. Clan members were bound by expectations, especially legacies. Since Jeremy was here on official business, he would be on his best behavior. Noble only vaguely remembered the young man with the axe on the day she came out of the gate. He and his boar had stopped her from floating into space with who knows what. So when Jeremy asked for a meeting, Noble immediately accepted. He was one of the reasons that she had been so determined to come to work today. Rescheduling was not an option. Awakened Jeremy, have you met my husband, Director Fort? Noble motioned to the man beside her. Fort, this is Awakened Jeremy. He was the one who found me at the gate last week. The 2 men nodded from the opposite sides of the room. Thank you for your service. Fort's gratitude was palpable. Jeremy had rescued the person most precious to him in all the world. I owe you a great debt. Anyone would have done the same. The young legacy waved away the praise. And having ascended Noble meet with me today is more than I could ask for. The professor smiled. Please come in and make yourself comfortable. Let me get you a chair to sit by my desk. A seat from the front row floated gracefully to the opposite side of Noble's desk. The vassal nodded. That works for me. Jeremy sent a furtive glance toward the door as he descended the stairs. When he reached the bottom, he was still glancing at the back of the room. Forgive me, Master Noble, I knew you were an expert on memories, but I had no idea that you also had an echo that could talk. That is truly fascinating. While I appreciate the compliment, B2 is pure spelltech. One of a kind and the best assistant anyone could ask for. Noble smiled thinking about her precious android. I see. Jeremy cleared his throat lightly. Well, you are well protected with such a vigilant bodyguard. Do you always have so much security at your door or have I come at a bad time? I am sure the security around the manor at Clan Valor is much tighter than even my room. Fort and I saw it for ourselves when we attended their most recent ball. Noble dodged the question. Jeremy's eyes opened a little wider as he adjusted his glasses. I am not surprised that you have been there. Valor only invites the best to their parties. I am honored that you think so highly of me, but it was my husband who secured that invitation. I was just another pretty face. Noble chuckled lightly. But that isn't why we are here. Shall we get started? Yes, please. Jeremy sat down, relieved not to have to comment on his hostess's looks. Will you be joining us for this meeting, Director Ford? I had no idea my presence would get your attention. I was here on other business, the director answered vaguely, but I would like to join if I may. Noble and her husband exchanged glances. Shouldn't he be asking her first instead of her guest? But his gaze told her that he wasn't yet ready to leave her side, and she conceded to let Jeremy decide. I have nothing to hide. Jeremy's emotions spiked. At least nothing in this meeting, he amended. Please join us. Taking another chair from a student's desk, Fort joined Jeremy on the opposite side of the professor's workspace. Noble cleared off the stack of papers that had accumulated during her class and pulled out a datapad. Folding her hands neatly, Noble gave the young awakened her undivided attention. What can I do for you? Your message mentioned wanting to talk about memories. The world was getting more complicated by the minute, but memories were Noble's happy place. Unlike people, memories were something she could understand and study. Ah, yes. I do research for my clan. I do not forge memories myself, but I use my aspect to get the truth to my clansmen so that they can put out the best memories possible. Jeremy nodded. Noble guessed that his part in memory development was more than the humble vassal was willing to admit. But even if it wasn't, their common interest in memories was more than enough to give him Noble's respect. Anyway, I have read your books and I had a few questions about your findings. Jeremy pulled out his communicator. On it were pictures and symbols of things he did not want to forget to ask. Noble didn't comment on the strange organization of thoughts. Perhaps his flaw did not allow him to express himself in written words. Clearing his throat, Jeremy started at the top of his unconventional list. Before we start, I would like to know your philosophy on human-made versus spell-created memories. Oh, Noble had expected a question like this which would challenge her to disparage Valor's creations, but she had not expected it to be asked so soon or so bluntly. I believe that both memory constructs have their merits. At the end of the day, as long as the memory works and protects the awakened using it, the value of that memory cannot be understated. I agree. Noble could feel the relief from the other researcher. He would have been willing to defend Valor, but thankfully there was no need. He could move on. Some of Jeremy's questions were about small details or clarifications. While Noble's published works were comprehensive, the works were geared toward a greater understanding of memories as a whole. The vassal of Valor wanted to dig deep into the minutiae, knowing the memories better than they knew themselves. It was rare that Noble found someone so committed to her passion. Jeremy was a kindred spirit. Fort, on the other hand, was bored out of his mind. Being mundane, Fort had never owned a memory nor could he see the runes. He had no access to his soul sea either, making some of the descriptions extra confusing. It took everything in him not to fall asleep while his companions carried on. Have you noticed any effects of tear on memories besides the possibility of more or stronger enchantments? The young man leaned forward in his seat. I think there are many things we don't understand. There is certainly a qualitative difference. I know you have felt it when comparing your own memories. How can I put this? While I have no research to back it up, I feel more wholly connected to high-tier weapons. Even more so if they are an elevated rank as well. Noble thought of her zenith. It was the strongest thing she owned and felt like an extension of her. That makes sense. Jeremy made a note. At last, the vassal of Clan Valor reluctantly sighed. His emotions shifted from one of curiosity to unease. I have taken up enough of your time, he apologized, but allow me one last inquiry. Idly, he pulled something out of his pocket. Noble felt her heart skip a beat. Suddenly, she had an inquiry of her own. Jeremy ran the shimmery object across his knuckles and back. But before Noble could ask about the bauble, the younger researcher cleared his throat. The last thing I want to ask about is the gate. How did you get through it back and forth? Feeling the sudden shift in conversation, Fort roused from his drowsy state. He tried not to appear disinterested, but Noble could feel his true emotions. The professor pressed her lips together. Jeremy's question appeared innocent on the surface, but the timing and change in demeanor gave the professor pause. During the meeting, the vassal of Clan Valor had relaxed considerably, but now he was nervous. Noble considered her words carefully. In the end, the truth seemed like the best option. I didn't go through the gate in either direction willingly. I had a memory that could pierce through barriers. It was summoned when I crashed into the gate, and it threw me directly into a seed. Then when the nightmare ended, the spell pushed me out the way that I came in. I have never heard of such a thing. That's amazing. May I see it? Jeremy leaned forward as if she might be hiding the portcullis key in her lap behind the desk. As much as I would love to show you, the portcullis key was destroyed before I could conquer the nightmare, Noble told him honestly. The young vassal's shoulders slumped. That is a shame. I can only imagine how thrilling that must have been to have in your possession. Jeremy considered what he would have done with such an item. Thrilling is not exactly the word that comes to mind. Noble wanted to tell him that while it had its uses, the memory had been far more trouble than she would have liked. But the enthusiastic researcher probably wouldn't have believed her, so she let his mind race. Realizing he had been quiet longer than was polite, Jeremy coughed lightly. Is there anything you can tell me about the memory that might help someone recreate it? By someone, you mean Valor? Fort interjected, sitting higher in his seat. Jeremy nodded. Why not? They have the best forgers. Imagine being able to go in and out of gates at will. Or in and out of seeds. Noble wasn't sure how to feel about that. Gates had always been one-way trips for nightmare creatures into the waking world. People passing through the other way was a strange thought. The young man met the professor's eyes evenly. Why not? I think it is worth researching. You said yourself that memories are just tools. Wouldn't a tool that makes it so anyone can come and go to and from areas that are not their citadel or tether be helpful? It was a reasonable application for the technology, but if the memory automatically threw the awakened into an unknown seed, then the consequences could be dire. Not that it mattered, the key was gone forever. I am sorry to tell you that I will not be much help in your quest for a gate key. That memory had runes written on top of runes. A sorcerer much more skilled than I could ever hope to be must have altered it to make it have that power. I have no way to recreate it. Noble shrugged. Jeremy nodded. I understand. Thank you for your time. I hope we can meet again soon. I would like that, Noble agreed easily. I will see you out of the building. When the vassal stood, he stowed his communicator and then moved to tuck the object he had been fidgeting with back into his pocket. Noble held out her hand. Forgive me, but may I see that? Jeremy froze, confused by the comment. You want my communicator? No, I meant the thing in your palm. I saw you using it to help with concentration, and I wanted a closer look, that is if I am not prying and it is some super secret Valor memory. Noble added to soften the strangeness of the request. Oh, this little thing. It's not magical or anything. Jeremy dropped a small stone into Noble's hand. The shimmery veins in the pebble were very distinctive. Noble studied it closely before forcing a smile. It's beautiful. Where did you ever find such a treasure? One of the members of Clan Valor has an aspect related to stone shaping. But their flaw is they have to compulsively make things, so some of us trade the rocks around for fun. A little bit like cash, but not really. Do you like it? Jeremy could see the stone reflecting Noble's eyes. I find it very interesting, the professor admitted. Then keep it as a token of my thanks for meeting today. You have given me a lot to think about. Jeremy smiled warmly. Noble's hand closed around the stone before she could even think about refusing the gift. Not that she wanted to. That is most generous. Thank you. And there is no need to see me out. I think I can find the way on my own. I am a graduate of the academy myself. There is a professor or two that I would like to visit before I go. Jeremy bowed deeply. Until next time. Noble dipped her head respectfully and Fort stood to shake the other gentleman's hand. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this meeting. Always happy when the government and Clan Valor have the opportunity to work together. Jeremy's words were practiced, but his intentions were pure. Noble watched him leave with a pensive expression. Jeremy had said that she had given him a lot to think about, but the reverse was also true. His final set of questions seemed to be the real reason for his call, which meant that Clan Valor was interested in her unusual reappearance. It made sense. They had sent awakened Jeremy to investigate the gate before her arrival, or he wouldn't have been there to help her. But that mystery would have to wait for another day. He seems nice enough, Fort commented when the door finally closed. Indeed, it's nice to see young men so interested in the important things. Like memories. Noble tucked her hair behind her ear and looked at the time. She yawned. Well, I guess the rest of the day is shot. I missed lunch, and I will need to have a custodian come and look at the floor. There is also the matter of finding spare wires for B2. Depending on which ones are damaged, I think I have. Seeing Fort's frown, Noble stopped. What is it? You are doing that thing. Fort tapped his foot lightly. What thing? Noble asked a little too innocently. That thing where you talk about anything to avoid a topic you don't want to discuss. Fort raised one eyebrow. I don't do that often, Noble sighed. Fine, oh super wise one, what exactly do you think I'm trying to avoid? Tapping his chin lightly, Fort tilted his head to the side. I'm not sure, but if I had to guess, it has to do with that rock in your hand. Noble's eyes darted away. What makes you say that? Because if you hold it any tighter, it will turn to dust. So, spill. Noble could hide from most anyone else, but somehow Fort could always read her like a book. Deep down she knew it was because she wanted to be fully known by him and only him. But sometimes it was utterly annoying. Holding out the stone, the professor sighed. I'll tell you, but first I need to know your opinion on something. Look at this rock. Noble dropped the stone in her husband's open palm. He studied it. The marbling was exquisite. The pink undertones ran in and out of the white and gray like the strings of a spider's web. It's a pretty rock, he answered at last, unsure what else to say. Very unique. Hold that thought. Noble pulled out her communicator and held up a picture. Would you say this rock came from the same place? Fort took the device and frowned. His eyes darted between the real-life specimen and the picture of Noble presented. Pink marbling with white and gray. The shimmers are strikingly similar also. Fort noted with some interest. So you think they came from the same place? The professor prodded. I'm no geologist, but I've never seen stone quite like this before. The director answered noncommittally. Neither have I. Noble chewed the inside of her cheek, and that's what worries me. Why? Where did the picture come from? Fort brought the picture closer to his face. And why does it look like there is a case number in the corner of the photo? The lovely professor blushed. It isn't like a case number. It is a case number. Noble, what have you gotten yourself into this time? The director felt the phone be snatched from his hand before he could back out and see where the image was from. What do you mean this time? Noble quickly waved her hand in the air. Don't answer that. Then answer me. Fort tried to keep the edge out of his voice, please. I said I would tell you, but you have to promise not to get mad and that you won't do anything with the information. Mom told me not to dig, and I did stop almost as soon as I started, I promise. Crossing her heart, Noble nodded vehemently. Back up. What does your mother have to do with a rock? The director rubbed his forehead. Lowering her voice, the professor tried to collect her thoughts. The first morning I was back at the house, I felt unsettled. That was putting it mildly, but Noble didn't want to let on about just how useless she had felt. My mother took me on that walk, and to make me feel better, she described the process of grieving she went through when Dad died. The goal was to help me realize how even though you didn't want to, all of you had slowly started to move on without me. Did that make you feel better? Fort furrowed his brow. In a way. It put things in perspective that I needed to be patient. And she was right. I can already see how much better it is getting. Noble clutched the communicator in her hand. But that is beside the point. During the conversation, Mom let something slip that she has been holding onto for years. What did she say? Fort felt a knot forming in his stomach. That's the thing. She wanted me not to tell anyone. But I wouldn't agree to that. And that is why I need you to promise that no matter what, you won't take any action with what I'm about to tell you. Noble winced. You are scaring me. The director looked at the pebble in his hand. What I am about to imply is scary, Noble confirmed. Promise me. Fort shook his head. But what if I need to? Promise. Promise you will be better than I was. Noble looked at the ground, ashamed. The director clenched his jaw. Fine, I promise not to take action. Now tell me. My mother believes the accident that took my father's life was not an accident. She believes he was murdered by one of the legacy clans. Noble blurted the words out before she could stop herself. She didn't like keeping secrets from her husband, and this one had been weighing particularly heavy on her soul. What? Fort, understandably, was in disbelief. No one has ever even hinted that there might have been foul play. What makes your mother think? Dad had found something upsetting in one of the clans, and he was arranging a clandestine meeting to work things out. But Mom thinks it must have been a setup since there was no one else inside the building when it collapsed. Noble swallowed. She was accusing the government of letting her father's murderer go unsolved. The fact was not lost on the director. Fort took a deep breath, trying to contain the initial feeling of outrage. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. It is not that I don't believe your mother, he began. In fact, if it were anyone else making these claims, I would dismiss them immediately. But, does your mother have any proof? No, and she hasn't ever sought any. She believed that if whatever the secret was got Dad killed, it could be harmful to me, you, and eventually the kids as well. She told me not to mess with it either. Noble would not meet her husband's eye. But you didn't listen, the director guessed. Wait, that conversation on the train. The hypothetical one. That was about your father. It was. And instead of taking your advice, I got Teddy to send a copy of the accident report. Noble tapped on her communicator to bring up the full document. Before you say anything, as next of kin I had a right to the information without using your influence. Fort grunted softly as he took the device and read the limited information provided. When he got to the bottom, his eyes narrowed on the picture that had been shown to him at the beginning. That was found at the scene. Frowning, the director's mind raced. It could be a coincidence. But it doesn't seem like one, does it? Noble could see the wheels turning in the man's head. No, it doesn't, Fort answered at last. The locations and circumstances surrounding his death. I had no idea. It reeks of foul play. This merits more inquiry. If we can find out why. No. After looking at the report I decided it wasn't a good idea to risk our family on something so far in the past. The pink stone just caught me off guard. I chose not to ask for the Awakened's name because what can I really do with that information? It will only bring trouble down on us. Noble had looked at the situation from every angle. As much as she wanted to solve the mystery, the potential cost was too great. You promised you wouldn't pursue this, the professor reminded her husband. That was before I knew we were dealing with a possible murder. Fort ran his fingers through his hair. It doesn't change that you promised. We cannot act on this information, no matter how tempting. Noble shook her head emphatically. The two stared at each other for a long time. Fort finally broke eye contact with an exasperated sigh. Fine, fine. I won't act on it. The man threw his hands in the air. Reaching forward, Noble caught it and tucked her arm neatly into the crook of his elbow. Thank you, she kissed his cheek. She sighed, and her eyes finally showed their exhaustion. If you don't mind, I've had way too much excitement for my first day back. Fort had to agree that the safety of home was all too tempting. He nodded. Let's go home. November brought with it a chill and a change in feelings in the NQSC. As more and more refugees flooded into the capital, their testimonies gave a more realistic picture of what was happening in Antarctica. So although Noble buried herself in her work and her family, she could not ignore that things in the South were undeniably bleak. That wasn't to say she dwelled on that fact. The nightmare had taught her many things, one of which was reinforced by her therapist. You must take things one day at a time. Awakened Alista had said. Sorrow will inevitably come, but that doesn't mean you should not accept and appreciate the joy that you have right now. Both are part of being human. It seems selfish, Noble admitted, to be happy when so many are hurting. Alistair nodded with a small smile. I could see how you might think that. You are very empathetic. There is a balance. You can care for others, but you should not do it at the expense of living your own life. So that is what Noble had been doing in the past month, living. She took care of her students and those around her, but she also stopped to enjoy the simple things. And one of those simple things was a proper date with her husband. It was long past due. Rain had gone out that morning to study and then spend time with friends. Noble loved that her daughter was becoming more social, but it did leave them without someone to watch the twins. While the twin 12-year-olds could almost be trusted to watch themselves, Noble wasn't quite ready to let them loose for a whole afternoon and evening depending on when their elder sister returned. They were a bit too curious and rambunctious to be left to their own devices for that long. While one was more likely to destroy the living room by borrowing his mother's practice weapons, the other was just as likely to burn down the house in some ill-fated experiment. The risk was just too high. But just when Noble considered calling off the whole event, Lena had volunteered her caretaking services. Noble could not have been more relieved. The new master spent all morning getting ready and was finishing getting the waviness in her hair just right when the doorbell rang. She flitted to the door, but Fort made it there first. A gray-headed woman beamed as she crossed the threshold. There you are, my favorite son. Lena kissed Fort's cheek as she entered. Even though the blonde man had entered into her family by marriage, she loved him the same as if he were blood. And my most wonderful daughter. Noble hugged her mother. We should be the ones flattering you, not the other way around. You are helping us a lot by keeping the boys entertained. Nonsense. Brock and Blaze are the two best grandsons in two worlds and no one can tell me otherwise. We are going to have a wonderful time together. Lena nodded emphatically. You two just relax and focus on the romance. Everything else is in good hands. Thanks, Mom. Noble squeezed her mother's hand. I'll never be able to repay you for all you do for us. Nor should you. That is what family is for. Lena patted her daughter gently. And speaking of family, I've been trying to talk to you about something. So you've said, Noble teased. I suppose I have been slow in getting to the point. Suddenly Lena looked very uncomfortable. Sighing, she forced a smile. You know what? It can wait until tomorrow. I don't want to keep you a moment longer from your time together. Noble frowned. Mom, Grandma, two chipper voices said in unison as they raced down the hall. They nearly crashed into the two ladies as they slid to a stop. I'm first, Brock boasted. That's because you cheated. Blaze rolled his eyes as he rubbed a sore shoulder. Be nice or you might make Grandma rethink spending time with you, Noble warned with a fierce gaze. Yes, Mom, the boys answered quickly. The professor's face softened. Good. Of course they are good. They are pretty near perfect by my estimation, Lena winked. And we have a full day of fun. Are you ready to go? Blaze picked up his shoes. Almost. I just need my jacket. Brock returned to his room and back in a flash. All right, you behave now, Fort chuckled as the trio headed toward the door. We will, the twins promised. Fort smirked. I was speaking to your grandmother. Don't you worry about us. Lena pulled her coat tighter around her as the door opened. You focus on having your own fun. But not too much fun. Brock corrected them. You promised you would be at the track meet tomorrow. The pleading in the boy's eyes made Noble's heart melt. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Personally, I'm fine with you missing it. Blaze shrugged only to be elbowed by his elder brother, but it seems I'm outvoted. We will be there and rooting for you both, Fort assured his children. I'll be there too, Lena nodded. It will be a full family event. The older woman met her daughter's eyes. We will talk then, Noble asked vaguely, hoping the boys wouldn't pick up on her extra meaning. The wrinkles around Lena's eyes deepened as she smiled. I am looking forward to it. A tacit understanding passed between the women before the elder lady was pushed out the door. Come on, Grandma. You promised to take us to an ancient arcade. Blaze reminded his chaperone. But not before you get us ice cream. It's good fuel for playing. Brock interjected. It's too cold for ice cream, Lena shivered. Can't we do hot chocolate instead? We know the perfect place, it has both. The voices became muffled as the door shut. They are going to wear Mom out. Noble blew out her cheeks. I doubt it. She can keep up with the best of them, almost as well as you can. Fort kissed his wife's forehead. And where do you fit into that metric? Can you keep up? Noble smirked. Today, my dear, I am certainly going to try. Fort wrapped a scarf around his neck. I look forward to it. Noble's eyes swirled. Before she could reach for her coat, Fort took it and offered it to his bride. She shrugged it on with a gracious smile. Thank you. I know the cold doesn't bother you as much as us mere mortals, but I don't like the thought of you being chilled at all, Fort said with a seriousness that caught Noble off guard. Then we shall have to keep each other warm, she answered, holding out her hand. Deal. Fort kissed the tips of her fingers before interlacing them with his own. Noble wanted to point out his need for gloves, but she was enjoying his touch too much to point out his error. Even if she had, it would have done little good. For a moment later the door swung open, and the couple was on their first official date since the Valor Ball. The cool day had nothing on the warmth of the affection between the married couple. Anyone who saw them might have thought they were newlyweds. In a way they were. Noble had barely been back a month. So Fort pulled out all the stops when it came to their date. Their first stop was a lovely lunch at a place that Sarai had recommended highly to Fort. The low-lit tables were perfect for quiet conversation and the waiter was a friendly face. Hello, Larry. Noble greeted the server before he could make his own introduction. The waiter froze, looking between the two people with a horrified expression. Ah, I suppose I look a little different than when you have seen me before. I am a friend of Sarai. The first time Noble had visited the establishment had been on the day she had found out about the dreadful prophecy from Emmer. In her frustration with the world and the anniversary of Seb's death, Noble had accidentally wounded Sarai and the meal had been friendly compensation. But Noble had been post-workout and spent most of the meal crying as she recounted much of her life story. I should hope I look a little different now that I'm a master and spent hours trying to look nice. Rather than being offensive, his lack of recognition was flattering. You are a friend of Awakened, Master Sarai. Larry repeated. Wait, I know you from the news. You are Queen Bee, I mean Master Noble. The professor smiled. She was used to those names being used interchangeably now in public. Her story of triumph had been plastered all over the NQSC by the government propaganda machine. It was a good change of pace from the gloom and doom that was becoming more common in the stories leaking from Antarctica. Therefore Noble had become a minor celebrity alongside her persona Queen Bee. That's me, Noble motioned to her date, and this is my husband Fort. Noble felt the interest of those around her shift. So many nosy eavesdroppers. Larry adjusted the towel on his arm. Welcome Master Noble and Mr. Fort. We are humbled that you have graced this establishment with your presence. Does this table meet your expectations or would you like a private room? We are fine right here, Noble assured him after sending her husband a questioning glance. Very good. What can I start you off with this afternoon? Larry held out 2 menus to the patrons. Fort glanced briefly at the synthetic paper. Let's have one of everything, he said. Fort. Noble blushed. What? I am good for the money. The gentleman winked. It's not that. It's just so excessive. Noble chewed her lip. On the one hand, she liked being spoiled, but on the other, she felt guilty about being wasteful with the NQSC's limited resources. Trust me, Fort told her, with a twinkle in his eye. Noble felt her heart skip a beat. Fine, she held up a single finger, but just this once. You won't be disappointed. The handsome blonde man winked. Noble hummed softly. With you, I never am. She turned to Larry and shrugged. You heard the man. Everything on the menu, Larry confirmed, a small smile forming on his face. You are definitely friends of Master Sarai. Hurrying off to the kitchen, the eager server turned in the order with glistening eyes. The kitchen, which had been sleepy nearing the end of the lunch rush, roared to life. Soon, food flowed out in a constant stream. When the table filled, another one was set up beside it. Soon, it, too was full. But the couple barely noticed beyond moving portions onto their own plates with serving spoons. The world around them barely existed. The only thing that mattered in the moment was the next bit of conversation being lobbed across the table. Or who could make the other smile more? Or who had the best memory when it came to past dates they had been on? Oh no, I have a detailed journal of all the time we went out before we were married. You never once took me to the park on the north side until you proposed. Yes, we went to that little bistro in the square, remember? Ford insisted. That was the same day. The brunette rolled her eyes before covering them with her hand. Are you sure? The director pressed his lips together. Positive. I think you actually intended to propose then but then decided to wait, so we walked around for a long time doing nothing. Noble teased. Are you saying I lost my nerve? That doesn't sound like me at all. Ford placed his hand on his heart, wounded. When it came to love, we were both a little innocent. But my memory doesn't fail me. It was the same day. Noble blew out her cheeks as Ford shook his head. Do we need to go home so I can dig out my journals and show you? Yes, please. I would love to know where you hide your old diaries. I've been aching to read some young adult drama lately. Ford said around a spoonful of dessert. My only drama was you goose. And they were journals, not diaries. Noble narrowed her gaze at her husband. Ford furrowed his brow as he swallowed. What's the difference? One makes me sound like a lovesick teen pouring out her heart to an inanimate object, and the other is a logical recounting of events to be recalled later. Noble tilted her nose up indignantly, then her face softened. I just didn't want to forget our time together, that's all. Very well, I concede. It happened as you said. Who am I to argue with such a meticulous researcher? How about we check out the park and see how it looks after all this time? You can have a new entry for your journal. Ford laid down his fork. Do we have time for that? The professor knew that her husband had made plans, and she hated to mess them up. We have however much time we want to do anything we want, my love. That is if you were ready to go. I'd love to. Noble looked at the enlarged table, her happy expression fading, but I feel very bad about all the wasted food. Ford didn't answer, merely held up his hand to catch Larry's attention. Pack up the rest of the food to go, please. And I'll tip you extra if you can get it done in 5 minutes or less. Larry's eyes lit up as he gave a modified salute. Right away, sir. Barely 3 minutes later all the dishes were packed in individual containers and ready to be transported. Noble looked at the mountain of food. This is enough to feed our family for 2 weeks. She sighed. I cannot imagine how much that bill must be. And you'll just have to keep guessing. Ford signed the datapad and had it whisked away before Noble could see. Come on. It's time for our next stop. Ford gallantly held out his hand as Noble floated up from her seat. How in the world are you going to carry all of this? The woman asked. The director's smile grew wider. That's the best part. I'm not. Noble soon got accustomed to the strange looks they got from the bags of food floating behind her and her husband as she walked. It was barely any effort for her to use her ability to drag the mountain of food behind her like a balloon. And if it meant she was able to hold Ford's hand while they walked, that was even better. Oddly, the park that Ford had brought up a little too naturally in conversation was only about a 5-minute train ride and a 20-minute walk through the streets of the NQSC. The food took up nearly the entire train car. How had that much food fit on the table? It seemed impossible, yet here she was staring at the bundles with her own eyes. It was a relief to get out of the cramped space and into the open air. The weather was chilly, but Noble barely noticed the time passing. The only time she really registered the outside world was when an older lady tried to get around them on the walking path and bumped into her instead. Her cane went sprawling out, causing the woman to trip as well. If not for Noble's quick intervention, the elderly person would have planted her face in the pavement. I'm so sorry. Noble gasped, grasping the lady's arm. You need to do something about that load of yours. It's taking up the whole walkway. I should report you for being a hazard. She snipped at her junior. The master blushed, embarrassed. I suppose you were right. While the woman sniffed experimentally at the air, Noble noticed her threadbare clothes. At some point in their walking, they had crossed into one of the poorer parts of town. Not quite the outskirts, but very close. What do you have there? Taking food home. Frowning, the lady patted her stomach. Noble shot a glance at her husband, but he seemed content to let her take the lead. She put on her most compassionate smile. I am actually quite full. Would you like a box to take with you? Turning around, Noble took the closest box from her pile. By the smell of it, the dish was full of cheesy, gooey goodness. I don't know, the lady eyed her suspiciously. Was Noble making fun of her and her hunger? Take it as an apology. The professor pressed the box into the woman's free hand. Thank you, the old lady said slowly. Fort tipped his wool hat. Have a wonderful day. The stranger scratched her head as the pair returned their slow walk down the path. Weirdos. Noble leaned her head on Fort's shoulder. I think we made a mistake not taking the food home before we continued with our date. Sure, the air is cold enough to preserve the food for a while, but I didn't realize this part of town had gotten so rough. Things have changed a little, Fort answered vaguely. Years ago Noble remembered how well kept the streets had been, but with so many refugees and so little space, the cleanliness in the outskirts and the places closest to it had seen a drastic decline. Noble began to fear what the park might look like when they finally arrived. Maybe this was a bad idea. What if this ruins my happy image I have of our engagement? Nothing could ruin that moment. Just trust me. Fort tucked her arm around the crook of his elbow. We are nearly there. Soon the street gave way and a large open area spread out before them. Oh, if not for some of the buildings as markers, Noble would never have recognized the place. What was once a serene park for young couples was now filled with peddlers trying to sell their wares as people passed by. People who walked the paved pathways seemed more inclined to hurry than stop and smell the few muted flowers. But the biggest change was the temporary structure right in the center of the square. Noble squinted, as that. Let's go see, Fort tugged her arm. Confused, the professor followed her husband until they reached the door. A nicely dressed government agent greeted them as they approached. Director Fort, ascended Noble. Right on time. Noble blinked. They were expected. Fort shook the other man's hand. Ewan, it is good to see you. It is good to be seen. Ewan pushed back his blonde hair before patting his stomach. And by the look of things it seems you brought what you promised. It smells amazing. It should be enough food to get your group a hearty meal. There are at least 2 of each kind. You'll have to excuse the few that we sampled, but I figure those can be children's portions. Fort laughed. I don't think anyone will complain about not having synthpast for once. Though if you have a loaf of beans, I might selfishly snag that for myself. No such luck, I'm afraid, Fort shook his head sadly. I'll have to get you one some other time. Noble felt her head reeling. I'm not crazy. The food did double when we left. And Fort tricked me into bringing it all here while on our date. But why? The director looked deep into his wife's swirling eyes and answered her unspoken question. You have such a big heart. I knew you would want to share that delicious food, so I found the closest refugee tent and offered to get them a meal. Thankfully this camp is small or I might have bankrupted us to do it. Pushing back the tent flap, Fort revealed a few dozen gaunt people huddled in family groups. They looked at her expectantly as the smell of the warm food filled the air. Noble's mouth dropped open. Sorry for using you as a delivery PTV, but I didn't figure you would mind. The professor's look of shock slowly bloomed into a smile as she turned to her husband. Just when I think you can't get any more handsome, you go and include taking care of others to our events for the day. That means a lot to me. Thank you. I live to serve, madam, Fort bowed. Mostly you, but occasionally others as well. Shall we? After entering the tent, the food was passed out quickly to the grateful occupants. It was not nearly what these people deserved as fellow human beings, but Noble hoped that for the moment, their day was a little less bleak. At first, Noble was surprised by how little they ate until she remembered that their usual diet was likely much smaller and far less rich. They were wise to take their time and savor this moment. Noble savored the moment too. Her heart went out to those displaced by the nightmare gates. From the youngest child to the oldest frail woman, Noble found herself caring deeply for these people's well-being. The familiar tingle in her soul activated. I hope it helps, she wished silently. After a while, Noble felt that their time there had come to an end. She turned to her husband with a happy sigh. What's next? Fort raised his eyebrows. What? Was this not enough? I thought this was the perfect date. It has been wonderful, Noble stumbled, I just thought. I'm kidding. Fort found his wife's pout too adorable. I have more planned, but I'm not going to tell you just yet. Like this stop, the rest of the day is a surprise. Taking her hand, they left the tent for their next adventure. After a train ride, Fort took his wife on a real stroll through a park before they found their way into a famous shopping center. The stores there were nicer than the market where Noble often shopped, and her eyes glistened at all the shiny things. There it is. Fort pointed to the shop up ahead. It was small but well furnished with a lit-up sign that read, Yo-Yo Bro Company. What is this? Noble pursed her lips. Something in the name triggered a faint recognition. You'll see, the blond man answered cryptically. A tinkling bell sounded when the couple entered and a slim, well-dressed awakened strode into the room with an eccentric air. His chestnut hair and strangely bright brown eyes made him look more like a painting than a person. All around him, the shop lit up with soft radiance as the shopkeeper approached, giving the whole scene a refined air. Welcome to Yo-Yo Bro Company, the gentleman indicated the embroidered yo-yo on his collar. I am the owner, Kenny. Do you have an appointment? Recognizing the name at last, Noble suddenly felt very out of place. While her family had always been wealthy, she had never been part of the super elite crowd. Despite its humble location, this establishment was exclusive to awakened socialites. Noble decided to back out of the store gracefully. I'm sorry. We were just passing by. Director Fort and Master Noble. Fort cut off his well-meaning wife. Ah, my 4 o'clock. Welcome. Kenny snapped his fingers, and the entrance to the shop closed and locked behind them. Follow me. Leading them to a private room with cushioned couches, the shopkeeper motioned for them to sit. Sit back and relax. Whatever your need, Kenny is here to make it happen. Or as I will be known in this session, Dat Fashion Bro. Now tell me, which one of you are we shopping for today? Fort rubbed his wife's back gently. Noble is a relatively new master, and I want to make sure she is equipped with the right clothing for anywhere she goes. Isn't that thoughtful? Kenny nodded. We have ready-to-buy memories, or if you want something truly special, I can take a custom order for one of the artisans of Clan Valor to craft for you. I can even throw in a handmade synthetic wooden yo-yo with any purchase. Noble shifted uncomfortably at his offer, and not just because he wanted to add a toy to her shopping list. The professor already knew this wasn't just any clothing store. It was a specialty memory clothing store. Awakened from all over the NQSC came here for Waking World and Dream Realm garments and armor. Let's hold off on the free offer until we have found something we like. Fort coughed lightly. I think we will start with the inventory that you already have in stock. Kenny seemed mildly disappointed by the answer as he gave a short nod. I will go get our current inventory for you to peruse so I can get an accurate idea of Ascended Noble's style. If you need refreshments, there are some cookies on the table for your enjoyment. Dat Fashion Bro strode out of the room, leaving the couple alone for a moment. Fort, Noble whispered, what in two worlds are we doing here? You said you needed clothing that wouldn't rip when you have to put on your armor. Wouldn't it be nice to have that in an outfit or two for backup as well? The blond man got himself and his bride 2 yo-yo-shaped sandwich cookies. The loyal tabard is nice, but I think as a master, you need more variety. But the cost. Noble pressed her hand to her cheek. She could feel her skin burning. We have enough, I assure you. Beyond my increase in pay with the promotion, I called in a few favors. The man winked. I'm not putting in custom orders to Valor. They should be helping the war effort, not making vanity items. Noble let the rest of her thoughts remain unsaid. We are on the same page, then, Fort agreed easily. Now enjoy yourself or all my hard work will go to waste. Noble's blush deepened. Thank you. Ah, here we are. Kenny returned with a round device that was attached to a string. Setting the object on the table, the owner looked expectantly at the pair. Another yo-yo. Fort tried to understand what he was seeing. What do you mean another? Kenny raised an eyebrow. It looks like I mean you seem very fond of yo-yos, Fort shifted awkwardly. What? Kenny turned up his nose. I can't stand them. Why do you think I give them away for free? Noble and Fort exchanged a glance. They had no response to that. Kenny pointed to the table. Let me show you how to use our catalog. The quirky shopkeeper pressed a single button and the screen projected the images into the air above it. To go to the next one, do this. To go back, move your hand like this. If you want a closer look, pinch your fingers. And if you want to favorite it or try it on, press here and we will have a fashion show once you have collected a few that you like. The instructions were simple and soon, the couple got the hang of skimming through the options. For someone who usually dragged his feet when it came to garment selection, Fort was incredibly interested in the process. He even added things that Noble would never have thought to try just because he wanted to be fully invested in the moment. Eventually, it was time to try on all of the selections. The process took much longer than anticipated, mostly because of how many things Fort had added to the lineup. Thankfully, by the fourth time she exited the dressing room, Noble had a better idea of what she wanted. This one looked better in the picture, she mused aloud. A dress made of chainmail sounds better in thought than in reality. Am I going to war or a ball? Why not both? Kenny shrugged. It brings new meaning to night wear. Seeing the unamused look on Noble's face, the shopkeeper faltered slightly. The man who sold it to me didn't care for the look either. It turned out Kenny had gotten a lot of the garments in the store from men and women who had earned them from the spell but had different tastes. Others were just looking for some extra coin for something they desired more. This one is nice. Noble showed off a simple blue-gray frock. It would fit well under armor but looked well enough on its own as well. You look stunning. Fort nodded approvingly. You have said that every time. I cannot trust you. Noble clicked her tongue. I did not on that green one, the director defended himself. That one had made her look like an ancient alligator. Fine, fine. Almost every one. Noble looked at herself in the mirror. But this time, I agree. The gray dress and 2 more outfits were bought and transferred into Noble's Soul Sea. She would never need to be worried about lacking clothing either here or in the dream realm. A weight was lifted off of her shoulders. Thank you. She rested her head on her husband's shoulder as they left the boutique. I am very happy about what we got, but I am a little sad you didn't take him up on his offer for a free yo-yo. Fort raised one eyebrow at her. What do you mean? He held up a small bag at his side. I got 2 for the boys and 1 for me. I'll be schooling them in the art of the breakaway in no time. Just don't obliterate them like you did with that video game. Noble ran her hand lovingly through her husband's golden locks. Fine, fine, I won't, the director chuckled. Looking at the time, his smile faded. We need to get a move on. I thought you said we had all the time in the world. Noble teased, poking Fort's side gently. We do, sort of. But it is better if we are not late for the next part. Unfortunately, they were. What do you mean you were sold out? We already had tickets. Fort practically screamed across the ticket counter. The teen behind the register squirmed under the director's withering gaze. We oversold that showing and all the seats are full. I can give you a refund. It is not about a refund. How could you give away reserved seats? Fort looked like he might have a blood vessel pop in his forehead. Sweetheart, it's all right. Noble sent a bit of calm to her husband only for him to thoroughly reject it. It's not all right. This romantic comedy came out today, and I reserved the tickets the moment they went on sale. They can't just give the seats away. I am sure the movie hasn't even started yet. The previews last forever. Fort glared at the ticket taker. Now give me the tickets I reserved. Someone is already sitting in those seats. The boy looked like he might faint. Well, they shouldn't be because I paid for them. Fort gritted his teeth. Sweat poured down the teen's brow. I'll take it from here. An older gentleman appeared behind the counter. You take care of the rest of the line, Jimmy. Yes, sir. Right after I go to the bathroom, sir. Jimmy ran off at full speed. Poor kid. Noble wished the boy well. I'm Remy. I understand you were late to a movie, and now we cannot admit you, the manager said smoothly. You gave away our seats before the movie began, Fort fired back. Allow me to give you a refund and possibly seats to another showing in our fine establishment. Remy clicked on the register behind the counter. Unfortunately, that particular film is sold out until next week. Could I interest you in a showing of The Devil of Antarctica that begins in 10 minutes? We can even throw in some complimentary popcorn for the inconvenience. Fort pushed his sleeves. I don't want. That sounds wonderful. Thank you for your help. Can we get our refund, tickets, and popcorn here, or do we need to wait somewhere? Noble pushed calm more forcefully into the situation. After one look at his wife's pleading eyes, Fort had no choice but to accept defeat. Remy gave them a condescending smile. I will do that for you right now. Popcorn. A few clicks later, Noble had their tickets in hand. I can't believe you let him get away with that. Fort whispered as they walked away. It isn't a big deal. As long as I am with you, I am happy to see any movie. Noble placed her head on the man's shoulder. He sighed. I wanted to take you to see a romantic comedy, not an action film. It had the romance label along with the action label up on the kiosk, so it can't be all bad. Wait, haven't you already seen this? The director shook his head. Mom took the kids one day while I was at work. It was a case of seeking forgiveness and not asking permission. That sounds like, Mom, Noble laughed. Well, good, then we can see it for the first time together, romance and all. Fort's face softened. You really know how to make the most out of everything, don't you? I learned from the best, even if he is a little hot-headed from time to time. Noble stuck out her tongue. Fort wanted to respond that he was only ever hot-tempered when it came to things concerning her and the kids, but her teasing gaze told him she already knew. Fine, he shook his head in resignation. Let's go meet this cold-blooded devil. Dash. The popcorn took a few more minutes to receive, so the couple finally made it to the theater when the lights were lowering. Noble floated past the people at the end of the row. Excuse me. The theater was around half full, with the seats nearer the center being the most bare. Noble wasn't sure how long the movie had been out, but it seemed that at least the initial lure was waning. More room for us. Noble hovered over the chair and made herself comfortable. Fort sat next to her, casually slipping his arm around her and pulling her close. Popcorn, he whispered in her ear. A few others filed in while the previews played, a remake of the Bloodwave Ascension film. A film about the early years of the Nightmare spell and the early heroes. Yet another action-adventure about rivals being forced to conquer a nightmare together. Can't they think of anything original? From the feelings Fort was giving off, he felt the same. Thankfully, the message to silence communicators and be mindful of other patrons flashed across the screen not a moment too soon. Then the screen faded to black. After an interminable silence, the darkness receded, giving way to a bleak, barren landscape. Antarctica. Already a battle was raging along the shore. A contingent of mundane soldiers was holding a line to allow innocent people to make it into the fortified city a short distance off. It was a losing battle, yet the soldiers did not give up. The camera focused in on a poor young man desperately trying to stem the tide against creatures much more powerful than him. As the MWP on either side of him was ripped in two, the young soldier found himself alone and cut off from the rest of his group. But the horde of monsters would not rest until all human life was obliterated from the icy landscape. He needed to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. A strike against the nearly indestructible polymer of his helmet created a large crack in the MWP's armor. Frigid air seeped into the suit, temporarily blinding the mundane soldier. He fell to the ground, and the knee of his suit jammed. A creature with a head like a lion and tail like a serpent loomed over him, ready to finish the soldier once and for all. The young man raised his weapon, ready to defend himself until his dying breath. But then, a shadow appeared and the dual-headed monster was suddenly sliced in two. A figure with ominous black armor stepped forward, his face covered with an inscrutable mask. Without missing a beat, the figure continued forward, slashing and cutting until the battleground was slick with the blood of countless nightmare creatures of all shapes and ranks. The figure moved in a blur of motion that only a series of quick cut scenes of action could accurately convey. At last, the enemy was vanquished. The young man was safe. The figure in black helped the fallen soldier to his feet and then mysteriously whisked him to the safety of the city's walls. "You saved my life." The young man bowed his head as he fell to one knee in his broken MWP. The stranger looked to the horizon, prompting a question from the soldier at his feet. "Who are you?" In the silence, the camera zoomed in on the stranger's determined expression before fading to black. Crimson letters looked like they floated up from the dark abyss. "The Devil of Antarctica." In subscript, it added, "A tawny production." Next scene was a man with chiseled features visiting the injured soldier in the army hospital. "Glad to see you pulled through, Ash," the officer nodded with a dark mop of hair. His onyx eyes were filled with concern. The young man on the bed brandished a winsome smile. "Thanks, Captain, but I cannot take the credit. There was a man out there." "No, not a man. A devil. He single-handedly took out the horde." The actor's pale face became even paler. "Take it easy, soldier. You've been through a lot." The captain patted his shoulder. "Ash." Noble sat up a little straighter. Of course, the name could be a coincidence, but it was nicer to think that the young man she had met years ago was alive and well. "Isn't that the actor who played Sonny in Song of Light and Darkness?" Ford leaned over and whispered. Indeed it was. The pallid soldier was the same actor as the lovable goofball from the Forgotten Shore flick. And the man playing the captain was a familiar face as well. Because his hair was a different color, it was hard for Noble to place him at first. Then her eyes went wide. "Ah, he played Castor in that same movie. He looks better with dark hair." Both actors had been thrust into fame by their roles in that iconic movie. Everyone in the NQSC knew them these days. Those were the only two big names in the film though. Everyone else was a newcomer hoping to be discovered. It made for an energetic and electric cast. As the plot progressed, the soldier named Ash became the plucky sidekick of the captain, who was of course revealed to be the mysterious devil. The combination of stalwart leader and innocent follower made for an endearing duo. The unlikely pair of the mundane soldier and mighty ascended were then brought into headquarters where they and their team were assigned a dangerous mission, to escort the people of Erebus Field through the wilds of Antarctica all the way to Falcon Scott. "Are you crazy?" Ash asked, earning a chuckle from the audience. Not that it was a laughing matter. It was a suicide mission, yet the captain did not hesitate. "It's only a few nightmare creatures," he scoffed with a dashing grin. A small band of awakened and mundane soldiers went out with their fearless leader, but the journey was grueling. They were assaulted by nightmare creatures by day and bitter cold by night. The odds were against them, yet they persevered. Noble wondered at the sweeping shots of nothing but mountains and ice. Is that really what the wilds of Antarctica looked like? Tani, the film's director, seemed to have done extensive research on the matter. Either the shots were legitimate or the special effects were top-notch. A terminal battle at the top of a ridge nearly brought the party to their breaking point. They fought against some fallen abomination with a head like a crocodile and human ears. The camera shook violently with each massive step. An awakened with hard eyes and a stern expression ran at the monster only to be thrown aside like a ragdoll. The camera zoomed in on his empty eyes looking toward the gray sky. The captain dug into some unseen strength and rallied his men. "We are nearly there." With a final push, the battered group brought down the mammoth creature. Ice flew in every direction, pushing back the awakened and mundane alike. Yet, they had overcome. They had reached Erebus Field. The grim devil led the charge, pushing his men with the promise of medical care when they reached their destination. But when they crested the final hill, it all seemed to be for naught. The city was destroyed. Ash fell to his knees and gave out a mournful howl. His lips trembled from both the cold and his devastation. The other soldiers likewise mourned the loss. Somber music enhanced the emotion of the scene. Only the captain stayed strong, looking at the molten ruins of the city with quiet indifference. "They will pay," he vowed. "Every last one." Noble found herself caught up in the action. The musical score was enthralling. The professor did not need to guess who wrote it. The actors were convincing as well, though their pale skin made the captain and his sidekick look like relatives. That was a little strange. But the rousing music more than made up for the actor's skin tone. It carried her along in its mournful melody, making her feel homesick. Noble felt a tear form in her eye. The song ended, giving way to somber silence. Erebus Field was gone, covered in molten lava from some hideous creature that none there could even begin to fathom. Their mission was a failure. They were failures. All that was left was to tend to the wounded and try and make the perilous journey back to Falcon Scott to explain. The captain sighed. Captain. A female awakened had turned away from the city and was kneeling in the snow. The fearless leader pulled his eyes away from the catastrophe to attend to his injured comrade. Only she wasn't injured. She was studying the ground. Look. In the frozen tundra, deep scrapes marred the pristine surface. A nightmare creature? Ash asked, coming alongside the others. No, the captain answered, a small hint of acknowledgement glistening in his unreadable face. People. With the female tracker, the remaining soldiers chased after the vain hope that all might not be lost. Tense scenes of running, pausing to get bearings, and more running led to a gaping maw of a cave. The captain shut his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of conviction. He dismissed his sword and brought his hands to his lips. We come in peace. We are here to help. A long pause drew out. Then, slowly, a lone awakened came to the entrance with an enchanted blade in her hand. Her white flowing gown melded almost seamlessly with the snow like she was covered in ice. Her pale skin and golden hair gave her an ethereal countenance. Are you refugees? She asked tentatively, sweat glistening on her pale brow. No, the captain answered sternly. The woman raised the sword higher, wisps of dark smoke wafting through the air. The captain chuckled, smiling for the first time since being introduced. It was disarming. We aren't nightmare creatures either, he answered, reading her thoughts. Her beautiful face changed slightly as it zoomed in on her bright eyes. Then, who are you? The woman in white and the man in black locked eyes, the images on the screen growing close until their faces were nearly touching. Who is he? Ash scoffed. Why, he's the captain. The devil of Antarctica. The woman's perfectly formed mouth opened slightly. But before she could answer, many dirty refugees came out from the darkness to stand behind the beautiful warrior. They eyed the rescue team warily. One shouted at the captain. We don't need a devil. We already have an angel. I saw that coming, Fort whispered. Noble froze. Not because of the action on the screen, but because she felt a familiar presence entering the theater. And the young lady coming toward them wasn't alone. Noble's eyes shifted from the screen to the darkened entrance at the front left of the theater. Rain wandered in quietly along with two teenage girls and a boy. Of all the movies to see, what are the odds? Noble had vaguely felt her daughter's presence when she entered the theater, but there was no real reason to pay attention until she got so close. Now, Rain had unexpectedly stumbled upon her parents' date. Yet Fort had said he saw it coming. How? They hadn't even been in view when he whispered the comment in her ear. How did you know? She whispered back, thankful that no one was directly in front of or behind them to shush them. It's the whole light and dark theme. Angel and demon. It made sense thematically. Fort wore a triumphant smirk. He's talking about the movie, not Rain, Noble realized. That made more sense. Her husband loved guessing the outcome of shows and films. He could often do so with startling accuracy. Makes sense, Noble couldn't argue with his logic. The movie claimed to have romance. At some point, the female lead would need to be introduced. While the action on the screen involved the two groups agreeing to work together, Noble watched the group of teens take their seats. The two other girls filed in before the boy and then Rain. Something about the order felt odd, especially Rain's emotions when it happened. But soon enough, they were settled 2 rows down and a little to the left of the married couple. At least it wasn't right in front of them. Fort's whispering would have surely drawn Rain's attention. It was probably better for everyone if the two groups had at least some separation. For his part, Fort hadn't noticed the late entrance. If not for her emotional radar, Noble might not have registered Rain either. So what if she's here? So are many other people. Noble turned her attention back to the main attraction. On the screen, the captain and the angel were poring over a map to decide the best way to get the caravan to Falcon Scott. While most had perished when the city fell, a group had managed to make their way to the remote fortification under the angel's guidance. With the slightest of smiles, the guardian of the people had accepted the captain's help. The beautiful woman in white was short on words while the captain, in contrast, had no end of witty quips as they studied the ever-changing landscape of the southern quadrant. Finally, it was time to head out. Of course, problems arose at every turn. The audience of the theater was filled with anticipation as the ill-fated journey unfolded. But two people were extra anxious, Rain and the boy next to her. Noble glanced their direction and then wished she hadn't. The young man had lifted his hands in the air in a modified stretch. His right arm came down without incident, but his left. Oh no, Noble could see what was happening in slow motion. The boy's arm crept along the back of Rain's chair before his hand came to rest behind her shoulder. He wasn't touching the girl yet, but Rain had certainly noticed the development. And she hadn't stopped it. Am I seeing things? No, the mother was certainly witnessing a boy put the moves on her daughter. Noble felt a mix of confusion, extreme discomfort, and the slightest bit of girlish delight. That last one, of course, would be snuffed out if the boy tried anything else, but for now, the innocence was a tad adorable. If only I knew who he was. Noble tried to rack her brain. Had Rain mentioned any boys since Noble had returned from the dream realm? No one immediately came to mind. How could she have missed this? The professor stiffened. You all right? If this is too much we don't have to stay. Fort gently rubbed his wife's arm and kissed her temple. I was surprised, but I can handle it, Noble responded automatically. Fort was still talking about the movie. After being trapped in an interminable cave, a host of flying nightmare creatures was chasing them down as they struggled to reach Falcon Scott. If it gets to be overwhelming, let me know and we can head out, the handsome man assured her. He never knew what might trigger her, and the super-realistic special effects might send her over the edge. Same for you, Noble answered cryptically. Fort chuckled silently. Don't worry about me. I have nerves of steel. That's good. Noble chewed her lip and tried to relax. Though there was nothing relaxing happening on the screen. The caravan of people narrowly made it into Falcon Scott after suffering heavy casualties. Together, the angel and captain held back the horde until it came within range of the fortress's defenses. The angel was tragically wounded by a titan in the final push, leading to a single tear falling down her expressionless face. Drained of energy and essence, the captain was forced to abandon his quest to deliver a killing blow and carried the lovely lady in his arms to the city gate. The movie moved toward the climax as the refugees realized that the safety of Falcon Scott was a lie. Titans were coming from all sides to attack, and the evacuation effort would not be completed fast enough. Unless something changed, they would all perish before the boat came back to retrieve them. Noble had to give the film's director credit for the drama. There had been many boats evacuating Falcon Scott almost constantly, but limiting it to a single source of hope gave the story extra tension. While it was hard to care about millions of people, it was much easier to care about the small caravan that had already suffered so much. A close-up shot of a young girl sitting in the snow and looking for the ship to come nearly broke Noble's heart. It was cinematic art. In the few days of quiet, the angel healed and a kernel of romance formed between the male and female lead. The chemistry between the actors was excellent, but Noble couldn't help feeling that something was off. Why did they look so much alike? Their faces make them look like twins. The rest of the audience, though, was eating it up. When the boat of salvation finally arrived, the Titans were already tearing the city apart. I have to stall, the captain announced when he saw that not everyone would make it in time. The woman in white stood beside him. I am coming with you. You are these people's hope, her dark-clad counterpart shook his head. Beyond that, you are still injured. I will stall and find another way to meet you on the other side. The captain clapped Ash on the shoulder. Make sure she gets the care she needs. Smiling weakly, the fearless leader caressed the lady's cheek. I love you, he told her. I will come to you. The lady in white's facade broke. Tears streamed down her face. I won't leave yo. The captain pressed his lips against his love's before she could finish the thought. Then using some unspecified power, he made her pass into a peaceful slumber. It was a poignant moment, but it was broken by a single frantic scream by the man beside her. What are you doing? Fort's untimely yell drew a large amount of attention. While some were touched by his passion for the character's true love, others frowned that he had broken their immersion in the plot. But one head stayed turned around even when the action on the screen continued to its tragic conclusion. Rain's dark eyes locked with her father's, and her face grew just as pale as the three members of the main cast on the screen. Noble would have found it comical if she could not feel the emotions of both people involved. Fort tensed, pushing his hands against the chair to stand, but Noble put her hand on her husband's knee. Don't you dare. Noble pressed her lips together. But it's Fort's harsh whisper was cut short by two of Noble's fingers touching his lips. His eyes met his wife's and they exchanged a silent conversation. Fort sighed and sat stiffly back in his seat. For her part, Rain leaned as far as she could away from the young man beside her until the conclusion of the film. Having stalled the final Titan, Captain sent a longing glance toward the ocean, where a lone ship was slipping away to safety. The caravan and his love were safe. Mortally wounded and completely drained of essence, the captain fell to one knee as he shivered against the increasing cold. Slowly encased in ice, his eyes never left the horizon. Thinking of the woman in white, he froze with a smile on his lips. The theater faded to black. When the house lights came up, Fort was already standing. Rain and her friends were nowhere in sight. Being in the middle of the row, it took a moment for the aisle to clear. The director tapped his foot impatiently. Noble chewed her lip. Out in the foyer, two other movies had let out about the same time. The mass of people was difficult to wade through. Noble took her husband's hand and smiled at him. So, what did you think of the movie? Personally, I think they left it open for a sequel. Ice won't stop a hero like the captain. And as for the romance, it didn't pick up until almost the end. It was an action movie through and through. The professor laughed lightly. Fort stopped scanning the crowd long enough to look at his wife. Are we really not going to talk about what happened in there? Noble frowned and whispered firmly. Not here and not now. Did you know? The man shot her an accusing glare. Of course not. I am as blindsided as you. Noble let her husband feel the sincerity of her emotions. Fort balled his fist. Then we need to find Rain and demand an explanation. Tell her. We've had enough drama in this establishment for one night. She looked at her husband meaningfully. The frustrated father turned his eyes back to the crowd. Rain's gone anyway, isn't she? Noble's eyes swirled for a moment before she nodded. I can feel her far down the street. You won't catch up to her. I can try. Fort defended himself as the crowd finally began to sift out of the lobby doors. But you won't. Noble narrowed her gaze. I won't. The man had meant the words as a challenge, but he knew in his heart that Noble was right. How about we enjoy our journey home and talk about a sane and reasonable strategy for dealing with our daughter growing up? Noble suggested, patting the man's arm. I don't want to be sane or reasonable. Fort mumbled petulantly. I know you don't, dear. Noble hid her smile behind her cough. The cool air finally hit their faces, bringing with it some much-needed clarity. Fort breathed deeply as they entered the darkness of the evening. Noble moved intentionally slow, both to savor the last moments of their day and to give her daughter time to leave on the train ahead of them. Shall we get a bite to eat? Fort must have sensed that she was stalling, but he could not deny that his stomach wanted more than just movie popcorn for dinner, so the pair found an open food stall and got noodles to go. It was a stark contrast to their decadent lunch, but it warmed the stomach just the same. At last, it was time to head home. The train ride back was filled with Fort's vehement insistence that his daughter never date anyone ever. Ever. Noble raised an eyebrow at him, amused. Rain is too young and innocent, Fort reasoned. She doesn't know how the world works. Then that is our fault, not hers. And that is something we can fix. But saying she can never date will end poorly, Noble pointed out. If my parents had made that rule, we never would have married. Fine, the director puffed out his cheeks. She can date when she is 30. Maybe 25 if she is lucky. Noble wanted to point out that they had gotten married younger than that, but could see it would do no good. We can circle back to how maturity and age are not directly correlated later. Right now I need you to promise me that you will let me lead whatever conversation happens. I can't promise that. Fort crossed his arms. Then I need you to at least promise not to say anything. Noble struggled to find the right word. Stupid. Embarrassing. Ridiculous. Insensitive. Rain was the one being insensitive. Fort's jaw tightened. That may or may not be true. The professor tried to calm her husband. But that doesn't mean we get to act in kind. The blonde man wanted to argue with her logic but could not. He sighed. I will do my best not to be insensitive. Noble smiled. That's the spirit. Just tap into those nerves of steel you mentioned earlier and everything should be fine. Fort shot her a long-suffering glance, and the couple fell into a tentative peace. When they reached the house, Lena was waiting for them in the entryway. Her smile was tight. Did you have a nice time? She asked as she shut the door. Most of it was absolutely perfect, Noble answered, hanging up her coat. My husband is excellent at planning the perfect date. That's good. Lena's expression relaxed slightly. I am going to head out then. The boys are in their room. I will let them tell you about all the fun we had today. You aren't going to brag like you normally do. Noble teased. I would, but your daughter came in about 3 minutes ahead of you, and the storm cloud over her head tells me I should head out before the hurricane hits. I'll see you at the track meet in the morning. Best of luck, you too. The grandmother slipped on her coat as she spoke, waved, and slid into the darkness of the night before either Noble or Fort could offer to call her a PTV. And not a moment too soon. From the hall, a pale girl with dark hair barreled out of her bedroom with an expression that would wither a flower. She faced her parents with the full force of her righteous anger. Why were you following me? The question hung in the air for a moment. Following you. Noble rubbed her forehead. We weren't following you. Then how in two worlds did you end up sitting right behind me at a movie? Rain insisted. You don't even like those kind of movies, Mom. First off, we were there first. If anything, you were following us, Noble corrected her daughter's thinking, and secondly, it was a bit of bad luck. Our original movie was oversold and that was the only place they could fit us in. Oh. Rain deflated. In all of her teen angst, she hadn't considered that her parents had better things to do on their day together than track her like bloodhounds. Her pale cheeks turned red. I am glad we had this talk. Good night. Stop right there, young lady. Fort found his voice. This conversation is far from over. Rain stopped her hasty retreat but did not turn around. Fort cleared his throat and asked calmly, why didn't you tell us you were going out? I told you I was going to study and then maybe catch a movie. Rain spoke over her father before he could begin what she felt would be an interrogation. She was so quick to give her explanation that she nearly missed the end of his question. On a date. Fort was proud of his mature treatment of the situation. That was until Rain turned around and he saw the fire in her eyes. A date. A date. I was out with a few friends. The pale teen looked like she might set the world aflame. All right, I think we need to take a step back and sit down. Perhaps have some tea, Noble offered. Friends. Huh. Fort scoffed. That boy with his arm around you didn't seem to think you were just friends. Fort's expression darkened. So much for a calm, united front, Noble mumbled under her breath. Cade's arm wasn't around me. He was tired from track practice, and he needed somewhere to rest his arm. Rain challenged. That is literally what an armrest is for. Fort's voice rose an octave as he spoke. And Cade, or whatever his name is, was definitely taking advantage of the moment. I saw what he was about to do when I yelled. You don't know how a boy's mind works. Rain's expression changed from angry to outright defiance. Oh. Then enlighten me. What dastardly thing was Cade planning by having his arm on the back of my chair? That's beside the point. The father stuttered. You need to tell him that if he has any interest in dating you, he is going to be waiting a very long time. Fort. Noble called out. That's enough. Both of you. But the damage had been done. Rain shook her head as hot tears formed in her eyes. It isn't my love life you need to worry about in this family. With a father who screams anytime a guy is within a meter of me, I will be single until I die. With a ragged breath, Rain turned and ran to her room. The door slammed. Noble glared at her husband. What happened to letting me take the lead on the conversation? We were going to listen more than we spoke, remember? You practically called her a liar when she said it wasn't a date. What happened to those nerves of steel? But Fort's stern look melted. I didn't handle that well at all, did I? About as well as a loving father who just realized his baby girl isn't a baby anymore would have handled it, which is to say, terribly. The corners of Noble's mouth turned up slightly. I want to protect her, Fort said lamely, dropping his face in his hands. Is that wrong? Not wrong, but in this case misguided. Noble rubbed her husband's back gently. I can fix this. I'll go apologize and then find out more about the Cade boy. And then, Fort stopped when he saw his wife's shaking head. I think the last thing Rain wants to talk with you about is Cade. You can apologize in a bit when she's a little less mortified. For now, how about you go check on the boys? I'm sure they have heard this ruckus. I will go talk to our girl. Just make sure that she really isn't dating him, please. Fort pleaded. Didn't you hear? With a father like you, she will be single forever. The professor rolled her eyes. Is it bad that I find that comforting? The man grimaced. Kissing her husband gently, Noble whispered, those are the kinds of thoughts you keep inside your head, dear. I'll be back later. Fort nodded. Good luck. The couple parted ways in the hall. When Fort touched the doorknob, a feverish amount of scurrying occurred in the boys' room. As Noble had suspected, they were straining to hear the drama occurring with their elder sister. Noble turned away, unwilling to give anything away with her mood-ring eyes. Fort could handle it, probably. I need to focus on my own goal. Brewing some tea, Noble loaded the tray while she ran the whole conversation over in her mind. Something Rain had said bothered her. The teen had mentioned that her life wasn't the one her parents should worry about. Did that mean there was someone else she should be worrying about instead? Noble shook her head. That was tomorrow's problem. Right now her goal was to clear up the confusion and comfort her little girl. Young lady, Noble corrected her thinking. She clicked her tongue. I have to be mindful of how I phrase things. The fragrant tea filled her nostrils as Noble arranged it with some cookies. Little girl or young lady, everything looked a little brighter with a warm drink and a sweet treat. The tray floated behind the master as she met with the moment of truth. Taking a deep breath, Noble knocked lightly on the door. Go away. A muffled voice answered. It's just me, Noble said pleasantly. I promise I won't bite. There was a long pause. I don't want to talk. That's fine. I just want to check on you. If it helps, I have tea and cookies. There was no movement on the other side of the door. Had Rain fallen asleep? It was unlikely. Just as Noble was debating whether to barge in or walk away and try again later, the teen finally spoke. Fine, you can come in. Noble hid her relief behind a neutral smile. When she opened the door, Rain was seated on the bed. Her face was clean but splotchy from the silent torrent of tears she had recently been suffering. You can leave the cookies and tea right there, the teen pointed to the table beside her bed. Oh, Noble's heart sank slightly. All right. Rain's emotions were erratic. Noble felt that the slightest prod would end very poorly, especially considering how the teen felt about her mother's unwelcome emotional manipulation. The mother nodded slowly. I'll be back to pick it up in a little bit if that works for you. Rain's eyes darted away. Thank you. Noble turned to leave. Rain sighed. Mom, I said I don't want to talk, and I meant it. But if you want to just sit here, I guess that would be okay. Noble smiled warmly at her daughter. I would be honored. Noble situated herself by the nightstand and poured the tea. She passed the cup along with a small plate of treats to her daughter. Rain took them with a nod. Leaning back on the headboard, she blew softly at the hot liquid. The older woman coughed lightly. I know you said you didn't want to talk, but may I? Noble almost didn't ask the question, but she needed to know. Rain glanced at her, and gave the faintest nod. Noble understood that she must choose her words carefully. Your grandma left those cookies. Noble pointed to the flaky circles. She always seems to know exactly when we need some. When I was a child I almost dreaded her baking because I felt it would bring trouble. Silly, I know. Noble bit into one of the cookies. Whether or not Lena could actually bring catastrophe with her baked goods, she was always able to fix the problem with the same sweet treats. Noble felt the warmth of the grandmother's love as the cinnamon melted on her tongue. Sitting on the bed, Rain felt it too. Her shoulders relaxed. It's too bad I didn't inherit her baking skills, Noble continued, earning the faintest of smiles from the teen. With a gasp, Noble placed her hand dramatically on her chest. Hey now, I'm not that bad, am I? Don't answer that. Rain shook her head at her mother's antics. I'll just have to show my love in other ways. Noble continued, like telling you about my humiliating experience making a card for a boy I liked when I was 16. I put it in his bag unsigned and he thought it was a prank from one of his friends and they all made fun of it before he threw it in the trash. I never dared to tell him it was real. That's horrible. Rain whispered over a sip of tea. Worse than your father yelling out in a crowded theater. Noble hoped her question would not make the girl shut down again. Rain considered for a moment. Let's not compare traumas. For what it is worth, your dad is sorry for his outbursts, both of them. Noble reflexively winced as she recalled both scenes. And he should be. Rain straightened her back. I'm not a child. We know that, the mother soothed. It's just hard for us. You'll always be our baby, our sweet little honey, but we have to let you grow up at the same time. It's a learning process, be patient with us. Dad said I couldn't date for a long time, Rain pointed out. Your father wants to protect you. The sight of you with a boy has rattled him. But if you like this guy, Cade. Noble felt her daughter's emotions spike. I don't. Rain's eyes darted away. Oh. Forgive me for prying, but at the theater, I could sense your feelings. Noble pressed. The teen sighed and put down her cup. Cade is in my study group. He is very nice, smart, and a good athlete, all the girls in class like him. So when he asked to study with me, Kayla, and Obi, I agreed. Rain paused, trying to collect her thoughts. Noble's mind raced too. Since the professor's return as a master, her daughter had been spending considerable time outside of class studying. The logical conclusion was that the teen was taking her studies more seriously, but now Noble saw the true motivation. And you found that you enjoyed his attention. Rain winced. Is that wrong? I didn't even notice it at first, but then when I did, it was hard to ignore. And then tonight, he sat between me and Kayla and I thought maybe he might be interested. I didn't hate the idea. The girl fell silent, her fingers running around the edge of the empty cookie plate. And your dad ruined the moment by yelling at the guy. Noble filled in the blanks. Rain's expression changed to one of surprise. What? No, Kate has no idea that dad was there. I'm not even sure he registered the scream because he cried out at the same time. He did. Noble was so mortified by her husband's outburst that everything else around her was simply background noise. Don't tell Dad. Rain's voice became quieter, but Cade did go to touch my shoulder like Dad claimed. But the moment he went to touch me, he pulled back suddenly. He spent the rest of the movie basically pressed up against Kayla. I thought maybe Dad had spooked him, but when we left the theater, Cade showed me his hand. It had 2 puncture marks on it. What? Noble tried to picture what her daughter was saying. The teen pressed her nails into the flesh of her hand to make a slight indent. She held it out for her mother to see. I know it sounds crazy, but it looked like a snake bite. I could hardly believe it. A snake. In the theater. The professor hadn't thought to search for snakes, but the idea of a single person being bitten in such a bizarre way was absurd. Wasn't it? I don't know how to explain it, but it was like something was protecting me. Rain's voice became pained. Why do you say that? Noble's eyebrows shot up. She had long felt a presence around the teen but never mentioned it to her. There was nothing Rain could have done about it one way or the other, so it seemed better to leave the conversation unsaid. When we got off the train, I offered to make it up to Cade for the injury he got while resting on my chair. I said maybe we could get dinner or go see another movie. He politely declined and turned around to ask Kayla on a date. Obi told me they used to be a couple, but Kayla broke up with him a while ago. I think, the girl's voice broke, I think he was only being nice to me to make Kayla jealous. Oh, Rainy. Noble leaned forward and embraced her daughter. It's fine, Rain lied. I'm fine. Stroking her daughter's hair, Noble kissed the top of her daughter's head. It's all right not to be fine. Grunting, Rain sunk helplessly against her mother's shoulder. Dad's right. I'm never going to date anyone ever. Make sure to tell your father that. It will make his night. Noble resisted the urge to laugh. Hadn't she said the same at that age? But the teen was in no mood for giggling. Boys are stupid, the girl muttered. They can be. Noble smothered a grin in her daughter's dark hair. I'm stupid, Rain stifled a sob. Noble's smile faded. Now, that is a lie I will never let you believe. Caring about someone does not make you stupid. You are brilliant, kind, and compassionate. The world is very lucky that you are in it. It doesn't feel that way. Wiping her face with her palm, Rain looked up at her mother. That's what all the best people say. If you knew half how amazing you are, you would get a swelled head and be too proud for your own good. Noble punctuated her words with a gentle gift of comfort. Rain resisted for a moment then leaned into her mother's embrace. Thanks, Mom. I love you. Noble tightened the hug. I love you too. I'll stay as long as you need. What if I need you forever? The teen's voice sounded small. You won't. Didn't you say you wanted to get stronger? Mundane or awakened, someday you will outshine me and everyone else with that fire in your soul. But until then, I'm here. Rain didn't answer, snuggling up against her mother until she fell asleep. Noble felt the girl's slow, measured breathing with a sense of profound relief. Things would look better in the morning. They always did. Not for the first time, Noble contemplated the future that lay ahead for her children, especially the beautiful girl in her arms. They were growing up whether she liked it or not. All she could do was prepare them for what lay ahead and hope it was enough. Noble thought about the snake bite and how Rain said she felt protected. Without thinking, Noble whispered into the air. I don't know if you can hear me, strange guardian, but thanks for defending my girl. If you could do that, you know, for forever, I would be very grateful. It was probably just her imagination, but she could almost swear a soft hissing filled the air. Laying Rain down on the bed, Noble kissed the sleeping girl's forehead. Sweet dreams. Are you sure you don't know who that Cade kid's parents are? Fort pressed the next morning as they were getting ready for the track meet. I can call the school and find out, but I have no intention of doing that. Noble looked pointedly at her husband while braiding her hair. She had given Fort the broad strokes of her conversation with Rain, but the professor conveniently left out the part where she had lost her mind and talked to an imaginary shadow in the darkness. For better or worse, the director had filled in the details on his own and labeled Cade a worse enemy than an unholy titan. Fort clicked his tongue. I will make a few phone calls. I don't need the school to locate this child. No. Noble eyed her husband evenly. You're right. Then it could be traced back to me. I know. I'll message Dimmy about this. He knows how to deal with this sort of thing. Fort pulled out his communicator only for it to go flying into the air. You will do no such thing. Cade's just a kid. I don't want his whole family sent to the slums or worse just because he made a poor choice. Beyond that, I am sure Dimmy has better things to do in Antarctica than settle petty scores here. Noble finished with her makeup and turned around. The sight was almost enough for Fort to forget the conversation altogether. But he held on by a thread. Don't underestimate my friend. The director leapt just enough to retrieve the device floating overhead. I'm sure he would love the change of pace and the chance to flaunt his various connections. Dimmy had left with the first wave of volunteers for the Southern campaign. His messages were so filled with jokes and sarcasm that Noble sometimes wondered if he was really facing the horrors of the Southern campaign or if he was holed up in the NQSC hiding from someone who he owed money. The latter was unlikely, but still. Come on, B. Are you telling me you don't want that obnoxious brat to pay for hurting our girl? Fort pulled Noble back from her momentary tangent. Her expression darkened. Deep down, she did want him to pay. In the middle of the night, she might have wished that he would get infected by the nightmare spell and die before morning. Noble was slightly ashamed to admit that if Fort had asked her then about contacting Dimmy, she might not have said no. But with the morning came cooler heads and a more reasonable perspective. In the grand scheme of things, the damage done was minimal. Rain would learn to be more careful with her feelings in the future. I want that young man to grow up and learn to think of others beyond himself. I am not sure that having Dimmy castrate him is the way to get that message across. Noble kissed her husband's cheek. It's sweet that you care so much, but think of it this way. I am sure you broke a heart or two back in the day without even realizing it, and no angry father came after you. Fort scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, never. Noble narrowed her gaze, but a knock at the door interrupted her upcoming inquiry. Mom, Dad, we need to go. Okay, Brock. We are ready. Noble called back. She felt her husband's relief. I'm coming back to that last bit about being a heartbreaker. But for now, can we agree that contacting Dimmy or anyone else about this Cade fellow is a bad idea? Fort clenched his jaw. Fine. Caressing his cheek, Noble smiled. See, I knew you could be the bigger man. Stealing a kiss, Fort frowned. One of these days I want to be the smaller man who gets revenge. You know, just to even out the scales a bit. Another frantic knock at the door drew the attention of the couple. Hurry uup. Unfortunately, Noble and Fort were not the only ones running behind. After an emotional night, Rain had slept in later than she meant to and needed more time before she was willing to be seen by the world. Rather than risk the twins missing their warm-up, Fort ordered a separate PTV to take them straight to the stadium. Knowing that the actual matches wouldn't take place until later in the day, the rest of the family took the time needed before heading out. Fort was about to get the three of them a PTV when Rain asked, "Doesn't being jostled around like that bother your flaw, Mom?" Noble had nearly forgotten that her daughter was aware of the master's limitations. It does sometimes, but then let's take the train. It will take maybe a minute or two longer and we won't risk your comfort. Rain zipped her coat and looped a bag over her shoulder. That's very thoughtful, Rainy. Thank you. Noble gave her daughter a side hug. Fort looked at the ladies before him. You thought of your mother before yourself. He studied his daughter carefully. You really are growing up before my eyes. I am sorry for my outburst last night. Your mom confirmed that it wasn't a date. I overreacted. I need to trust you more, both to fight your own battles and use your own good judgment. Thanks, Dad, that means a lot. Rain hugged her father, filling him with fatherly compassion. Fort knit his brow. Just, please tell us before you do go on a date. I'll have to get my head wrapped around it. Don't worry. That won't be for a very, very long time. Rain missed her father pump his fist in the air. But Noble saw it and rolled her eyes. At least they were getting along again. If only all problems were so easily fixed. Placing glasses on her face to shield the sun, Noble opened the front door. Come on you two, we have a train to catch. In less than half an hour they were at the area-wide track meet. The stadium seemed left over from the Dark Ages in many respects, though the Spelltech upgrades gave it a modern look. The concessions below the stands were almost completely automated and the sound and video system were top-notch thanks to a fundraising campaign a couple of years before. The state-of-the-art facility was ready to host the youth of the NQSC in all things track and field. It was shaping up to be quite a day. As the family made their way through the tunnels and into the stands, Noble spotted her boys warming up on the turf beside the ovular track. Seeing their family, the twins stopped stretching to wave and point farther up in the stands. Grandma, they mouthed. Rain understood a moment later as she scanned the crowd. I see her. Grandma is up there. She saved us seats. Sure enough, about 8 rows up Lena was waving and motioning them forward. The trio snaked their way through the crowd and made it to the bench at the same time as another familiar face. Noble welcomed him with a confused smile. Teacher Julius. Noble thought for a moment that her eyes were deceiving her. But her bushy-browed mentor came and joined them at the bench with a glowing grin. I didn't expect to see you here. Noble gave the man a hug. Of course, I would be here. After all, Lena invited me and, Julius paused, shooting a glance to Lena, who shook her head slightly. The teacher's smile tightened. You know how much I love the twins. I am happy to be here to support them. You are a good man. Noble was touched by Julius's gesture. He surely had other things he could be doing, yet he was here supporting her family instead. He is, Lena agreed. Noble, I should go get some refreshments before things get started. It's going to be a long day and I think the sprints are close to the end. Noble nodded. I can get that, Ford offered. You stay here and, nonsense. I will get them. Teacher Julius, would you like anything? Popcorn. Something to drink. Noble dipped her head at her colleague. Julius shifted uncomfortably before nodding. A snack would be nice, dear girl. I am not sure what they have though. I'll figure it out. The professor decided. She got everyone else's order before heading below the stands. She was nearly out of earshot when she heard Lena's voice. I know. I'll fix this. Fix what? Noble wanted to know. She nearly turned to see what her mother had broken, but the flow of people prevented her from making the move. She was enveloped in the shadow of the stands a moment later. There was a long line of people waiting for the automated concession machines, so Noble joined the queue. She could hear the noise of the crowd increase as the announcer started the event, but she wasn't worried. The morning's events weren't one in which her children would compete. Before them, there were a bunch of once antiquated events that had come back into fashion with the appearance of the nightmare spell. Children could compete in the javelin throw or the long jump as these skills were ones that might help them if they ever became awakened. So, Noble had plenty of time before she was needed back in her seat. When she got to the front, Noble ordered a considerable amount of food and refreshments. It would be better to order too much than to have to make a second trip and wait in the madness again, she reasoned. Gathering up her haul, Noble apologized for taking so long to the person behind her. Can I help you with that? No, I have an aspect that lets me levitate objects, but thank you. Noble turned toward the voice but saw no one. Am I hearing things? Despite the proximity, maybe the question wasn't directed at her. But she could sense a presence. Her brain struggled to recognize the emotional signature. Awakened then. You remember me. The disembodied voice said excitedly. It would be easier if I had a face to put the name to. Noble bit her lip. What? Oh. Then suddenly materialized. Sorry about that. My flaw activates my abilities at the strangest times. Don't worry about it. It is good to see you. Noble dipped her head with a small smile. Now that she could see him, Noble recognized the brown-haired gentleman as one of the awakened that had been newly assigned to the Crestfall Citadel by the government. He had made a good first impression on both her and Sarai, but they hadn't had much interaction since then. It's good to be seen, Ven chuckled. Thanks again for the offer to help. Who are you here to watch? It was always hard to tell awakeneds' ages, but Noble thought the man was too young to have a child competing in the day's events. My nephew. I just arrived when I saw you might need a hand. Ven rubbed the back of his neck. But since you don't, I'll be on my way. I wish your nephew luck unless he is competing against my boys, in which case may the best man win. Noble smiled amicably. They both turned to head to the stairs leading to the stands when Noble's smile faded. Just great. She muttered. Is everything all right? Ven realized after the fact that he might be prying. Noble shot a sidelong glance toward a small alcove under the bleachers where a handsome teenage boy was talking to a girl in a tracksuit. Noble had sensed the boy before seeing him, and the sight only made her more unsettled. That boy upset my daughter last night, the professor said vaguely. Oh. Then glanced over his shoulder to get a better look. Suddenly the sound of the two teens' voices was loud and clear in Noble's ears. Maybe we should get a bite to eat after this, just the two of us. Cade asked as he leaned casually on the wall. I'd like that. The excitement was evident in the girlish giggle. I'll meet you back here after my race. Sorry. Then quickly allowed the voices to recede. My secondary ability is amplifying and dampening sounds. Sometimes my flaw. Don't worry about it. I'm not upset. That boy can hang out with whomever he likes. It isn't my concern. Noble put on a brave face. That's good. I hope your daughter finds someone less upsetting soon. Ven offered as they continued up into the stands. It turned out that the rest of Ven's family was sitting in the row behind Noble's. Introductions were made before the two groups quieted and Noble passed out the food and drinks. I got your favorite candy. Noble passed the bar to her daughter. The one without honey, she winked. Thanks, Mom. Rain took the chocolate graciously before quirking an eyebrow. What's wrong? It's nothing really, the mother hedged. I just saw Cade downstairs talking to Kayla. I figured I should mention it in case you run into them while they are here. Rain nodded slowly. That makes sense. It is an area-wide track meet for all ages. I should have expected Cade to be here. But Kayla, are you sure? Noble hadn't gotten a good look at Kayla the night before and hadn't paid her much attention until after the fact. Cade was asking a girl out, who else could it be? I suppose. Kayla just said she would be at her dad's house today and that's clear across the NQSC. Maybe her plans changed. Rain shrugged. It doesn't make any difference to me what they do, she added half-heartedly. Noble gave her daughter a side hug and offered her a drink to go with the chocolate. Something felt off. The girl under the bleachers had mentioned meeting up after her race. Perhaps Kayla had convinced her father to let her compete today instead of being at his house. That was probably it. Noble looked at the field. Already children were launching long spiked poles across the field to see who could throw the farthest. One of the larger students threw much longer than expected and nearly impaled a coach who shouldn't have been on the field. It was a comical but terrifying sight. The crowd was loving the drama. Noble wasn't too worried. She had locked onto the javelin to redirect it if needed. But the spear had fallen short on its own. Phew. What was the coach thinking? It seemed others were feeling the same way. A small argument between adults broke out on the field, halting the proceedings. Noble looked down the row at her family. Lena caught her eye. It was time to talk. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.